the woman was going to introduce her daughter to her brother. Even though he looked like a watchdog, she was sure that Aika would love this man. She loved her younger brother very much and wanted to instill this love in her daughter. All of Aika's toys were given to her by this very man. Aika was sure that if her mother loved this man, then she herself would love him. At least that's what she thought. Soon Ayaka met her uncle, who was not particularly happy that the child would now live with him. The man called Aika, calling her a nut. Aika didn't like this. The girl shouted at him that she wasn't a nut at all. Then the man called Ayaka shorty, which made the girl even angrier. The man continued to tease the girl and called her stupid. Aika was perplexed. Her expectations were not met. After all, her mother's only brother, Kaisel, turned out to be such a terrible person. Kassel told Aika that now they would have to live together. The man immediately warned the girl that he was not interested in raising children. He asked Aika to be quiet and not get under his feet. Aika herself was also not used to raising adults. After the conversation, Kassel asked Aika to get out of his sight and eat something. Aika didn't want to eat because she had just had lunch, but Kassel insisted on his own. After that, Kassel left. Aika continued to stand in place, thinking about how evil her uncle was. The girl's full name is Aika de Valiart. Aika left behind her loving grandfather in order to live with an uncle who can't stand her. Aika had her own reasons for this. She wanted to save her uncle. Aika did not understand how an adult could not understand the heart of a child. She considered her uncle an idiot. Aika lives in a large country called Wofford, where wars have been fought for centuries. But now the Valiart, Deslin, and Nodium families have united with the emperor and stood up to defend Wofford. The history of the House of Valiart is short, but they are said to be the most famous. Aika's grandfather, Elad, was a great man who served 2 generations of rulers. Uncle Aiki, the strongest swordsman. Aika's mother, Syria, was the chancellor of Wofford herself. In Aika's memories, her mother was constantly busy. She almost never had days off. Aika didn't know her father, but her mother told her that he was destined for great deeds. When Ayaka believed that they could live happily without their dad, one incident occurred. Aika asked her mother to talk to the man faster, because she promised to read to her. Soon, Syria was reading a book to her daughter. She was perplexed, because usually Aika is patient, but this time she didn't leave her side for a second. Aika explained to her mother that she had a strange feeling that she would soon miss her very much. The woman wanted to console her daughter and say that they would never be separated. But suddenly, she noticed people in masks in the middle of the road. Syria realized it was an ambush. The knights got out of the carriage to protect the chancellor. They started fighting with the bandits. The bandits needed to find some kind of necklace. They found a necklace, but what they needed was not there. They managed to pull that thing out. The bandits took the necklace and decided to return. One bandit was ordered to hide and search again. Aika was horrified. Syria covered her daughter with her body. The woman asked her daughter not to scream and to be quieter. Syria handed Aiki a small stone and asked her to swallow it. Aika did it without any further questions. Syria apologized to her daughter for not being able to protect her. Aika cried. She didn't understand what was happening, but Syria told her daughter that she now had special eyes. She asked her daughter not to be surprised by anything, no matter what she learned or saw. It would help her save the people dear to her. Syria asked her daughter not to tell anyone anything and keep it a secret. Aika promised her mother that she was ready to do anything just so that her mother wouldn't get sick. Syria smiled and praised her daughter, asking her to remember her promise. When Aika opened her eyes, her mother was already gone. Grandfather told Aika that she was not found in the carriage with her mother, but in the forest nearby. All of Aika's memories were mixed up after the incident. The palace was conducting an investigation. Aika was not allowed to know anything. She only heard that the emperor was beside himself with rage. Aika understood his anger, because the emperor was an old friend of her mother. Therefore, he, like Aika, was extremely sad. That day, at the funeral, Aika cried very hard. But suddenly she noticed something. She noticed a man with red hair, the same as her mother's. That was when she met her uncle for the first time. Aika was confused and rushed to the man, calling him Mommy. Seeing her uncle with the same hair and eye color as her mother, Aika thought she had come back to life. Aika clung to her uncle, whom she had just met, and did not let him go. After this, Aika had the chance to live with her grandfather, and there she understood what her mother meant, namely about special eyes. Aika gained the ability to sense danger threatening others in advance. She gained the ability of foresight. At first, she saw the future in her dreams, but later the visions began to manifest even while she was awake. Having become accustomed to this peculiarity, Aika learned to prevent accidents with the maids she liked. One day, Aika had a dream in which her uncle was caught off guard by something dangerous. Then Aika woke up. She cried because in her dream, someone had attacked her uncle. Now that she knew the future, she couldn't just watch it from the sidelines. She wanted to prevent trouble for the sake of her mother, to make sure that her uncle did not die. Aika decided to stay close to her uncle and protect him. Someone asked the girl if she needed anything else. It was Zenda, a servant of the Legere estate. Aika asked Zenda if she knew where her uncle was. The maid said that the gentleman was going to go out for a walk, which means he could now be in the dressing room. Aika thanked Zenda and said that she would go to him. Zenda invited Aika to have something to eat in her room. She promised to brew her some sweet cocoa, but Aika still wanted to go to her uncle. Zenda warned Aika that it would be better not to disturb the master when he was busy, but Aika still stood her ground. Zenda resigned herself and decided to take Aika to her uncle. Aika came to the door and told her uncle that she had arrived, but behind the door, in the room, there was silence. Then Aika began to call her uncle even louder. The man left the room and reminded Aika that he had asked her to be obedient. Aika suggested to her uncle that they play mother and daughter, but Cassel didn't understand why the hell he should play that. Aika did not deviate from her goal of being with her uncle. She rushed towards him and grabbed his leg. Cassel did not understand what was happening and tried to push the girl away from him. He asked Aika to let him go and said that it was time for him to go, but Aika did not let him go. Cassel realized that the girl was stubborn. In this, she reminded him of Syria. Aika asked her uncle not to leave and offered him all her goodies in exchange. Cassel didn't understand whether Aika really thought that doll-like eyes would stop him. He was still trying to get rid of Aika, and she asked him to stay with her just this once. Cassel was not ready to give in to his niece. Aika understood that if her uncle left like this, he would suffer greatly in the fight with the man from the dream. One day, Aika secretly overheard a conversation between Cassel and her grandfather, where she learned that her uncle was eliminating people who did not get along with Valiart, one by one. This meant that Cassel now had a huge number of enemies. Aika thought that if she didn't stop her uncle, he wouldn't leave her the same way her mother did. Aika let go of her uncle, sat down on the floor, and burst into tears. She said that she missed her mother. Cassel thought about it. He sat down next to Aika and said that every time he missed his mother, she could look in the mirror. Aika told her uncle that she didn't look much like her mother, but he reminded her a lot of her. He was, after all, a copy of her mother, only in male form. Cassel didn't understand what he had done that made this girl sit on his neck. Aika asked her uncle if he really hated her, because she was a thorn. Cassel didn't understand where she got that from. Cassel told Aika that he didn't love her, but he didn't hate her either. He asked the girl to return to the old man, since he was having trouble raising children. Aika told Cassel that she liked him, because her mother told her a lot about him, and she really wanted to meet him. Aika hoped that her uncle liked her too. Aika told her uncle that she wanted to get along with him. She asked for permission to stay with him. She promised her uncle that she wouldn't bother him too much. Cassel stood and silently looked at the girl. Looking at Aika, he remembered his sister. Cassel told Aika that she could do as she pleased. He allowed her to do whatever she wanted, but said that if she got in the way too much, she would regret it later. Aika was very glad that she was allowed to stay. She took out a piece of paper on which it was written that her uncle would never abandon Aika, and asked Cassel to put his finger on the paper. Cassel was perplexed. He couldn't even imagine that a girl could slip him a contract. He took the piece of paper, promising Aika to put an imprint on it later. Aika asked her uncle if he would go somewhere today. Cassel answered that he would just ride his horse in the garden. Syria always taught her daughter that everything should be recorded, so Aika documents everything. Aika calmed down. Cassel said that he would not go anywhere. The problem was solved. But then Ayaka began to have visions. Uncle was riding a horse in the garden. Suddenly, he screamed because the horse began to behave strangely. After this, Uncle Aika was killed. Aika came to her senses. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew for sure that her uncle was in danger. Meanwhile, Cassel stood near the stable. Aika ran to her uncle. She was perplexed, because 2 dangers in one day was too much. But she didn't meet her uncle. The estate's butler, Rito, stood in her way. Rito told Aika that the gentleman had already gone for a horse ride. Aika ran to look for the stable. She didn't understand why her uncle was always in a hurry. Soon Aika managed to find Cassel. Aika rushed to him. She called him a liar, because he said that he would not go anywhere. Cassel didn't understand where he had lied, because he was skating in the garden of his house. Aika told her uncle that he couldn't ride this horse, but Cassel didn't understand what she was talking about. The horse was acting somewhat restless at this time. Cassel didn't understand what was happening to his horse. Here Aika noticed something strange. The horse began to lift its hooves, although they usually do not do this. Aika approached the horse and realized that his hoof hurt. Suddenly, Aika became afraid of something. The thing is that Cassel started to pull Aika away from the horse, telling her that it was dangerous to approach horses like that. Cassel then turned to the groom and ordered him to take Gunther for examination. Because the horse got sick, Uncle Aiki changed his mind about riding. Aika was glad, because today her uncle would definitely not be harmed. Aika's mood noticeably improved. Cassel looked at Aika and did not understand what was wrong with her. He didn't understand why she was so happy, because she had done wrong. He didn't understand why she had climbed out and exposed herself to such danger, because if she had stayed with her grandfather, she would have grown like a hothouse flower. That is why Cassel did not want to take Aika with him. Aika gradually fell asleep. Cassel brought her into the room. Then he carefully laid her on the bed. Cassel stood and looked at the sleeping Aika. He did not understand why she continued to cling to him. Cassel wanted to go, but Aika did not let go of his hand. She asked him to stay. Cassel decided that he urgently needed to do something about this before he became attached to the girl. 3 days passed. Aika was looking for her uncle. Cassel and his bodyguard, Gerard, were in the office. Gerard, seeing Aika, decided to leave him and Cassel alone. Cassel asked Aika why she came and why she couldn't sit in her room. Aika turned the album and showed Cassel the drawing. She had drawn herself and her uncle. Cassel was a little shocked by the way Aika drew him. Cassel told Aika to ask Zenda to help her get ready. Cassel decided to visit his grandfather's estate. Aika was in 7th heaven. Aika wanted to take a gift for her grandfather, cupcakes, which were brought to her in the morning. Soon Zenda was already helping Aika get ready. Aika hadn't seen her grandfather for a long time, but she didn't understand what had come over her uncle, that he had decided to leave so suddenly. After some time, Cassel's carriage arrived at Aika's grandfather's estate. As soon as Aika got out of the carriage, she immediately ran to her grandfather. He too was glad to see his granddaughter. Cassel noticed that his father took great care of his hair. His natural color was red, but the man had been dyeing his hair to match Aika's hair color for a long time. The man carried Ayaka inside the estate. He noticed that Ayaka had not gained any weight at all and scolded Cassel for this. Here, Aika told her grandfather that she had brought him a very tasty present. Soon the second snack was completed. The maid approached Aika and asked her if she would like some juice. Aika asked her to bring it. She decided to ask the maid something. She was wondering when her uncle and grandfather would come. Marie told Aika that her uncle and grandfather were discussing something very important. Then Aika heard something. It sounded like a carriage driving away. Aika seemed to understand what was going on. She got up from the table and quickly ran to the exit into the yard. Aika ran out into the yard, but there was no one there. She walked up to the gate to see what was going on. Her grandfather stood in front of the carriage, and her uncle was in the carriage itself. Aika didn't understand whether Cassel had really decided to leave her. Aika ran to the carriage and started shouting at Cassel that he was a liar. Grandfather grabbed Aika and warned her that she might get hurt if she continued running like that. Aika couldn't break free from her grandfather's arms. She only looked at Cassel's carriage as it moved away. Aika cried. She didn't understand why he was doing this to her, because she just wanted to save him. Cassel heard Aika's screams. He heard her asking him not to leave. Time passed, and grandfather was sitting by Aika's bed. Aika, however, became angry at everyone and didn't want to see anyone. The man couldn't understand how his little girl could sit with such a face. She was offended by her grandfather, because if he had not stopped her, she would have caught up with Cassel. The man suggested that Aika go and eat something tasty. He reminded her how it was before, because they lived well then, but Aika didn't want to. Aika was also offended by her uncle. He abandoned her, although he promised not to do so. Several days had passed since the young lady's departure, and it seemed to Rito that the estate had become very lonely. But Cassel, on the contrary, liked this silence. Then Gerard knocked on Cassel's door. He said that a man had arrived from the Duchy of Valiart with a message about a young lady. Cassell asked Gerard what the man had conveyed. Gerard said that on the first night, Aika fell asleep crying, and since then, she has been completely depressed and eats almost nothing. Aika was waiting for Cassell. Gerard invited him to visit his niece. Cassell thought about it. He soon said that this would not last long, because she was a child. The assistants tried to object to him, but Cassell sent them to do their work. Cassell was left alone in the office. He remembered that Aika loved treats very much. She was so happy then. Cassell couldn't concentrate on his work because he was thinking about Ike, but he didn't want to get even more attached to her. That's why he decided to end it all now, before it's too late. But Cassell was already attached to the girl. That night, he mounted his horse and rode to the Valyart estate to catch a glimpse of Aika's face. He just wanted to check what she looked like. He didn't want to enter through the main gate because he had only come to see her. So Cassell decided to climb over the fence. Cassell knew that Aika slept in the room where Syria used to live. But then Cassell saw something. There were two men standing not far from him. They were the ones who killed Aika's mother. They had some kind of goal in the Valyart estate. But then Cassell approached them and asked them where they were going. He was shocked that these bugs had made their way here too, and the men didn't expect to see Cassell here. Cassell asked them if they were ready for the consequences, since they had the audacity to attack the Valyart estate. Cassell grabbed one of the men and asked him who was behind all this. Then someone came up to Cassell from behind and swung at him. Cassell parried the blow with ease. Then he turned to his opponent and relaxed. It was his father. The man did not understand what was happening. Cassell told his father about the attack. Here, Cassell realized that his nut could be in danger. He decided to leave the attackers on the old man and go look for Aika. He hoped that Aika was now sleeping peacefully in her bed. Looking into Aika's room, Cassell was convinced that everything was as it was. But then he suspected something was wrong. He decided to go over and check for sure. He started lifting the blanket. Everything turned out to be different from what Cassell thought. Instead of Aika, there were toys under the blanket. Waking up, Aika began to feel tightness in her chest, as if something was squeezing her body. When Aika woke up, she saw a terrible picture. A snake was wrapped around her body. The snake asked Aika to do something. Then she opened her mouth right in front of the girl. Aika was scared. Then Aika woke up and realized that it was a dream. Then she heard some strange sound coming from outside the yard. The series told the daughter about scary shadows and how she needed to hide when they appeared. They had practiced playing hide-and-seek beforehand. Right now, those same shadows that she saw with her mother have visited Aika. Aika hid, hoping that she could stall for time until her grandfather came and saved her. Aika heard footsteps in her room. She was sure that she wouldn't get caught. But then the steps stopped right in front of her, and Aika became scared. She didn't understand if they had really found her. But then Aika heard her uncle's voice, who couldn't understand where she had gone. Aika called her uncle. He immediately rushed to the closet. Aika carefully began to climb out. Cassell asked Aika what she was doing here. In such a strange place. Aika was convinced that it was indeed Cassell in front of her and rushed towards him. She immediately started asking him questions. She was interested in whether the shadows had gone away, whether it was possible to end the hide-and-seek, and she also said that she was very sad after he left. Cassell couldn't understand whether this was not the first time Aika had played hide-and-seek like this. Aika said that she used to play like this with her mother, who told her to always stay there during the game. Since Grandpa's closet was the same as theirs, Syria told her daughter to hide in it if the shadows came. Cassell didn't understand anything. He was interested in what the hell his sister was doing. Aika clung to Cassell and asked if he would take her with him, since he had promised not to abandon her. Cassell stood and silently looked at the girl. Then he turned away and told Aika that he had not abandoned her, but simply left her. Aika burst into tears and asked Cassell not to leave or to take her with him. Cassell sighed heavily. He was speechless. Then Cassell sat Aika down on the bed. He asked her to get some sleep and said that he would not leave her. But Aika no longer believed her uncle. Aika went somewhere and asked Cassell to sit here. A couple of minutes later, Cassell was tied to Aika. Aika suggested that they sleep like this and then go home together in the morning. Aika wished her uncle good night. Cassell was confused. He could not resist the girl. In the morning, Aika's grandfather came into her room to check on her. He didn't understand why Cassell was playing hard to get if it couldn't be avoided. Time passed. It was time for Cassell and Aika to leave. Cassell told his father that he was taking the nut back since everything had turned out this way. Ilid promised his son to strip him of his title if even one tear fell from Aika's face. As they were leaving, Aika promised her grandfather that she would come visit more often. Castle was interested in whether all the uninvited guests had been caught. Ilid said that there were no strangers left on the estate. Ilid promised his son that they would pay with blood for underestimating the Valyart family. Cassel asked his father to notify him if there was any news. Then Cassel and Aika got into the carriage. Soon they arrived at Cassil's estate, and the first thing Aika did was run to Zenda. Zenda was overjoyed to have Aika back. After all, without Ayaka, the house seemed empty, and Zenda also became more attached to Ayaka than she thought. Zenda wanted to become Aika's protector and support. Aika was encouraged by the fact that Zenda was on her side. Aika realized that if everyone took her side, then if something happened, Cassel wouldn't be able to scold her or kick her out. Aika told Zenda that she wanted to be friends with the others, just like she wanted to be friends with her. Zenda was curious about how Aika planned to achieve this. Aika asked Zenda to tilt her ear. Aika told Zenda her plan, and she was surprised. Then she laughed. Zenda thought this idea was great, and Aika was happy. Soon almost all the servants were not like themselves. Cassel thought it was strange. They all seemed to be enchanted. Then Aika came out to Cassel and Gerard and asked how they got there. Cassel reminded Aika that he had told her to behave well, and Gerard asked Aika how he could help her. Aika said she had something for them. Aika took a red ribbon out of her pocket and handed it to Gerard. Gerard was surprised. Aika said that he could pin it on his lapel. Aika said that she prayed to the flower to bring him happiness. She thanked Gerard for always protecting her. Gerard thanked Aika and promised to take care of the gift. Cassel still didn't understand what kind of commotion was happening in the mansion early in the morning, and whether Aika was involved in it. At this point, Gerard had already attached the ribbon, and Cassel understood that it was better to ignore this. Otherwise, he would not avoid whining. Cassel expected that Aika would put a ribbon on him too, but she only said that she would not bother them anymore and said goodbye. Cassel was confused, and Gerard also didn't understand how this happened. Cassel was also waiting for a ribbon and was surprised that Aika did not make him one too. Soon Aika made dinner, and her mouth started watering from the dish. It was the first time she had seen anything like it. The estate's chef, Sophie, gave Aika a return gift, golden fried root vegetables. Aika liked the dish. Sophie suggested that she add fruit and salad leaves next time. Cassel remarked to Sophie that it had become too noisy. Sophie apologized and said that thanks to Aika, every day was now filled with only happiness. Here, Cassel turned to Aika and asked if she had forgotten anything. Aika said that it didn't seem like it and continued eating. Cassel reminded Aika that she should remain silent while eating. Aika remembered that she wanted to ask her uncle for something. She took out a piece of paper and handed it to Cassel. Cassel took the paper. The first thing he noticed was the imperial coat of arms. Aika took this piece of paper from Cassil's desk because her name was on it. Aika was invited to the emperor, so she wanted Cassil to accompany her. Cassel asked Aika if she knew the emperor. She replied that she did not, but he was a friend of her mother. Cassel told Aika that he did not want to accompany her. Aika didn't understand why. Cassel suddenly said that it was because his chest was empty. Aika didn't understand what he was talking about. Cassel stood up and left the table, ordering Aika to leave the plate clean. Aika realized that her uncle had become completely depressed, but Sophie had no idea that the gentleman was so petty. Aika realized that in this situation, she would not be able to get into the palace. Gerard also noticed Cassel's upset from the moment Aika did not give him the brooch. Gerard didn't believe that Aika could cheat her own uncle, but he didn't understand what the matter was. Entering the office, Cassel and Gerard noticed a box with a brooch on the table. Gerard said that it seemed that Miss had left him. She was late because she was preparing the best gift and asked Cassel to try it on. Cassel told Gerard that he didn't understand why he put this on himself. He said that he didn't understand what was so special about this plain little thing, but he himself, pleased, began to try on the brooch. Cassel asked Gerard if he had also received a brooch in a box, but he said no. Gerard said that most likely Miss made it only for the one she loves the most. Cassel asked Gerard to stop flattering and reporting, but Gerard was glad that Cassel had finally cheered up. Gerard said that the investigation into the attacker's crew had been completed. 38 criminals had already been dealt with, and 7 were still being sought. None of those caught said anything, and all those who were not tortured committed suicide. Cassel also asked to convey to Aika that she can prepare for tomorrow's visit to the imperial palace. Morning came. Aika was happy. She showed off her outfit to Cassel. Aika noticed that Cassel was wearing a brooch and said that it suited him very well. Cassel tried to keep his cool and ordered Aika to hurry. Here, Cassel remembered something. Before they left, Cassel put something on Aika. Aika wasn't particularly happy about this. Soon, Cassel and Aika arrived at the imperial palace. In the palace, everyone was paying attention to Aika. She felt uneasy. She asked her uncle for permission to remove this pendant. Her uncle's name was too big, but Cassel told Aika that she had to wear it all the time. Aika tried to persuade her uncle and promised him to stand still, but he still did not allow her to remove the pendant. Then a man entered the room. He immediately noticed Aika. Aika looked at the man. She didn't understand if it was the emperor himself. Emperor of Wofford, Winchester Celador. Aika remembered his name. Saria always told her daughter that she should know the emperor's name. Purple eyes are a symbol of the royal family. The emperor also had black hair, like a starless night, just like Aika herself. The series told her daughter about the emperor's appearance, and Aika realized that black hair was more common than she thought. Standing right in front of the emperor, Aika was at a loss. She introduced herself to the emperor as the granddaughter of Ilad Valiart. The emperor was touched by Aika and was pleased to meet her. The emperor knelt before Aika and asked permission to hug her. Aika, of course, was not against it. She spread her arms to embrace the emperor. Aika and the emperor hugged. The man was looking forward to this meeting. He was shocked that Aika had already grown so much. He thanked her for coming to visit him. The emperor told Aika that she looked a lot like her mother. Aika asked him if he was friends with her mother. The man told Aika that he, Saria, and Cassel were good friends. Then the emperor noticed the necklace on Aika. He realized that Cassel had given it to her. He thought it was cute. Then Aika remembered that she had prepared a gift for the emperor. Aika took a brooch out of her purse and handed it to the emperor. Aika thanked the emperor for inviting her to his place. The emperor was surprised. He did not understand whether Aika was really giving him this brooch. Here, Cassel reminded Aika and the emperor that he was still standing next to them. He quietly hinted that his brooch was more dazzling. The emperor took the brooch and thanked Aika. He promised to keep the brooch carefully because it was the most special gift for him. The emperor decided that since he had received a gift, he should reciprocate. He asked his maid, Sola, to bring him something. Soon Sola entered the room with a small box. Aika froze, wondering what it was. The emperor explained that Saria had once asked him about this, saying that Aika was very smart and would need it. And only now the emperor was able to give it to Aika. From under the black cloth, the emperor took out a small box. The box contained the key to the old archives of the imperial palace. Aika was surprised that her mother asked the emperor about this. The emperor explained that such archives contained very ancient books, which contained knowledge that many did not even know about. Saria personally told the emperor about this. She was sure that Aika was capable of finding something special. He handed the key to Aika and allowed her to look inside at any time. Aika took the key and began to remember her mother. She felt warmth in that key. Then, Aika remembered that she needed to thank the emperor. Aika thanked the emperor, who told her that she could come to him even if it wasn't for the archive. Here, the emperor told Aika and Cassel that someone wanted to see them and was already waiting for them at the palace. It was the emperor's nephew, the same age as Aika. The man thought that he and Aika could become friends. Aika, hearing the word friend, was happy. The emperor warned Aika that the boy might seem prim at first, but he was a good child. The boy entered the room, and the emperor greeted him. Aika looked at the boy. He seemed handsome to her. He was like moonlight. The boy approached Aika and introduced himself. His name was Ruspe. Ruspe Winteriskelpodia. About 2 years ago, Ruspe picked some flowers in the yard for his dad. Walking along the corridors, he accidentally overheard a conversation. Winchester did not want to get married. Someone regretted that he became the emperor. Winchester was supposed to get engaged. There was no heir, and Ruspe was not a way out of the situation. Entering the room, Ruspe saw Duchess Palin talking to his dad. Duke Ricardo Winteris, father of Ruspe. The Duchess noticed that Ruspe had dirty hands, and she became angry because he was the future heir to the throne and he needed to behave appropriately. She took the flowers from Ruspe and threw them away. Father told Ruspe that he could no longer indulge his whims. He ordered his son to act in accordance with his position. He sent his son to the imperial palace and ordered him to study hard. After all, it was Ruspa who could become emperor if Winchester was left without a successor. The children met. Rusp was glad to see Aika. Winchester told him a lot about Aika. Winchester hoped that the boys would get along, since they were both 7 years old. Winchester had to go. Duties awaited him. He sent the boys to the garden, saying that it was safe there. Winchester promised to see Cassel at the next meeting. The emperor asked Aika to take care of herself and said that if she had any problems, she could turn to him. Cassel took the boys to the garden and asked them not to go far from him, while Aika invited him to play with them. Cassel said that he wouldn't be interested in the kids, and Aika said that they wouldn't take him if he suddenly changed his mind. Aika took Ruspa by the hand and suggested that he leave his uncle and play together. Aika began to offer Ruspa various children's games, but Ruspa didn't like anything. He thought it was boring, because these games were for little children. Ruspa hasn't played anything like this for a long time. Aika noticed that Ruspa had changed. His behavior had become different. Aika began to offer the boy other games, but again, he didn't like anything. Here, Aika remembered another game and was sure that Ruspa would definitely like it. She picked the flowers and asked Rusp if he liked them. Rusp's face immediately changed. He remembered that incident. Ruspa told Aika that he didn't like flowers. Aika didn't understand what was going on, because adults love flowers. Aika said that her mother loved flowers very much, but Rusp snatched the daisies from Aika's hands and threw them away. He didn't understand who had planted this vile thing. Aika asked Ruspa to let her rest. She said that he did not have to force himself to be friends with her. Aika realized that Ruspa didn't like flowers. Ruspa told Aika that he didn't hate flowers completely, just a little bit. Aika came up with a plan. She ran somewhere and asked Rusp to stay put. Rusp didn't understand what Aika had in mind. He found it touching. Rusp believed that Aika should return to the Marquise. He did not want to make friends. Soon Aika returned to Ruspa. Aika extended her hands to him. Rusp looked and was surprised. In Aika's hands was a flower ring, which she wanted to give to Ruspa in honor of their acquaintance. Ruspa told Aika that he didn't need friends. Aika heard sadness in Ruspa's speech. Rusp said that such a ring is only for children. Aika reminded him that he is still a child. Cassel always told Aika that children only need to eat well and play a lot, and the rest was the responsibility of adults. Aika wanted to be friends with Ruspa, make flower rings together, and meet again. Aika wanted Ruspa to become her friend. Aika asked Ruspa to take the ring. Ruspa was confused. He carefully reached for the ring. He didn't know if he was allowed to be anyone's friend, but Rusp still accepted the ring and put it on his finger. Rusp recalled his father's words. He believed that he did not need friendship. His father said there was no need for that. Rusp stood with tear-stained eyes and looked at the ring given to him by Aika. Aika didn't understand what was going on. Aika thought that Ruspa didn't like the ring. She told him that they didn't have to be friends. Ruspa wiped away his tears and told Aika that everything was not as she thought. He thanked Aika for the gift and said that he also wanted to be friends. Ruspa agreed, and he and Aika became friends. After a while, they were already walking hand in hand and discussing all sorts of delicious things. Aika was in a good mood. She laughed and promised to bring Ruspa something tasty. But suddenly Aika changed. She felt sick and cold. Ruspa put his jacket on her and decided to take her to the Marquise. Aika felt dizzy and her skin was crawling, even though the weather was warm. This had happened to her before, when she first saw the future. Someone was looking at the boys from afar. It was the Duke of the Deslin family, Lagia, who believed that Valiart was already ingratiating himself with all his might. Also with the Duke was Achilles, his adjutant. Evening had come, and Cassel's carriage was on its way home. Aika sat in the carriage and cried. Cassel did not understand what had happened. He thought that she had already missed Ruspa. That was it. This was Ayaka's first friend, so she wanted to have fun longer. During their farewell, Aika and Ruspa agreed to meet in exactly 10 days. Aika also passed something on to him. It was a handful of candies. She specially selected them for Ruspa. She collected all her favorite candies in this handful. Rusp was surprised by such a present. Aika was about to leave, but Rusp stopped her, saying that he also had something for her. He gave her flowers that reminded him of Aika. Aika was happy with such a gift and promised to take care of them. Aika thought that if she hadn't frozen, they could have played some more. She didn't understand why she suddenly felt so cold. Aika hoped that Ruspa would get home safely. Ruspe rode in the carriage and stared at the candies that Aika had given him. Kamai, the Kelpodia family's valet, suggested that Rusp put the candies in his bag, but Rusp flatly refused. He wanted to carry the candy himself. Kamai was surprised, because the young master didn't even like sweets. The next day arrived, the estate of the Marquis de Ligier. Aika burst into her uncle's room. Cassel changed his clothes. As luck would have it, Aika always burst in on him at such moments. Aika apologized to her uncle and said that she had an urgent question. That night, Aika thought about the fact that the emperor was friends with her mother and about their similar hair color. Cassel didn't understand what Aika was getting at. That's why Aika wanted to ask her uncle something. She wondered if the emperor was married. Or maybe the emperor has a child. Cassel was at a loss. These questions were too unexpected for him. He also didn't understand why Aika cared about this. Aika said that she was just interested. Aika begged her uncle to tell her whether the emperor was married or not. Cassel told Aika that the emperor was not married and ordered the sixth to go. But Aika began to ask why the emperor was not married. She wondered if the emperor really had the one, as they write in fairy tales. Cassel was at a loss. He said that this was also possible. Then Aika began to ask her uncle who his beloved could be. Cassel couldn't stand it and threw Aika out the door. Aika was furious. Cassel was friends with the emperor, but he didn't tell her anything about him. A couple of days passed. Ligier estate. Cassel noticed that Aika had started to behave strangely lately. She was always causing trouble, but now she has become quiet and calm. Cassel passed by her. Aika asked where he was going, to which Cassel said that it was none of her business and asked her not to follow him. Aika took this calmly and left her uncle alone, but Cassel didn't understand whether she wouldn't even beg him to take her with him. Cassel liked it, but it seemed strange and even suspicious. Cassel said that he went and asked her not to do anything wrong and to look after the house, to which Aika only wished him a good trip. He didn't understand why Aika didn't insist on her own way. He thought she had something in mind. Her exemplary behavior, in its own way, unnerved Cassel. Cassel went to the first big ball since Syria's death. Cassel approached the carriage and first asked for a report on the task he had given. Most of the criminals were dealt with, but 7 were still wanted. Cassel looked at the documents, but he couldn't concentrate. He thought that he should check Aika again. He hoped that she was already fast asleep in her bed. Then his gaze fell on a large chest on the next seat. He thought that Aika was there and told her to get out. But no one came out. Cassel got angry and shouted at her to come out. Here the lid of the chest began to open little by little. Soon Aika crawled out of the chest. She asked Cassel how he knew she was there. Aika climbed into the chest when Cassel was talking with Gerard. Her uncle did not tell her anything about the balls, although Aika was interested. There was nothing to do, and Cassel allowed Aika to do as she wanted. He allowed her to go with him to the ball. Aika was delighted and began to thank her uncle. Cassel asked Aika not to flatter and to sit up straight so that he could style her hair. Aika was excited because the ball was being hosted by her grandfather, and she could finally see him. Soon they arrived at the place. Aika was impressed. The whole mansion sparkled like stars. Aika was madly in love with her grandfather's estate. Cassel asked her not to go far from him. Aika remembered how her mother dressed up and went out in the evenings. If Aika had known about the ball then, she would have tagged along with Syria at least once. Aika and Cassel began to enter the mansion. Aika was confused. She didn't understand why everyone was staring at them. The girls were glad to see the Marquis. Many were hoping for his arrival. The guests were also interested in Aika herself. Aika didn't understand what was happening. She had never seen these people, but they knew her. Then Aika felt the cold wind again. Her heart began to beat wildly. Suddenly, a man approached them. He couldn't understand what the noise was about, but it turned out to be someone who rarely came to balls. Cassel did not understand whether there was a reason for not showing up for the family celebration, to which the man replied that, of course, there was not. The man told Cassel that, on the contrary, he was glad to see him in good health after so many hardships. Aika didn't understand what kind of man this was. It seemed to her that she had already seen the symbol on his cane. Aika was taught not to approach people whose eyes were like snakes. Aika was a smart girl and should have been able to recognize such people. Deslin family, snake. The Rondo family was a turtle. Syria told Aika to avoid these people. Aika realized that she needed to run. As Rondo aged, his misplaced anxieties grew stronger. Marquis Gemiel de Rondo. Aika remembered her mother's words that she should stay away from the turtle family because they are close to snakes. Aika didn't understand why she felt so cold, and the old man's voice was too familiar to her. Cassell told the man that they had to go, but he didn't understand where they were rushing to. Jamiel was interested in Aika. He had never seen her. He didn't understand if she was the rumored prime minister's daughter. Cassell got angry and grabbed the old man by the hand. He advised Jamiel to leave, because if he said another word, he would get into big trouble. Jamiel said he would be careful and clarified that he didn't mean anything bad. He just wanted to say hello. But now he realized that today was not the right moment. Aika and Cassell moved to the center of the hall. Aika was still scared and stayed close to Cassell. Here Aika saw her grandfather. She immediately ran to him. Aika remembered that she wanted to ask her grandfather something. Aika asked if she had met Marquis Rondo when she was little, and her grandfather was surprised. Aika said that she felt like she had heard his voice before. Cassell told Aika that she might have confused the voices, but Aika stood firm. Aika said she couldn't stop worrying because her mother told her to be careful around Rondo and Deslin. Aika studied with her mother. She remembered the coats of arms of other families and drew them well. Cassell was surprised. Then the grandfather leaned towards Aika and said that he had prepared a gift for her. Grandfather built an academy for Aika. He wanted to take Aika there when she grew up. Cassell was pleased because he didn't want to send the nut to some rotten school. Grandfather wanted to build a new academy for Aika, but Cassell believed that it would be easier to take control of the existing one. But he believed that the academy that Aika would attend could not be less than ideal, so he made it a prestigious academy. Grandfather suggested that Aika visit the construction site sometime. After all, if she lays at least one brick, it will become a good memory for her. Aika decided to tell her grandfather about her new friend. She said that they agreed to meet him at the palace in 10 days. Cassell asked Aika to get off her grandfather because he was busy, and Cassell needed to meet the guests. Aika wanted to stay with her grandfather longer, and he promised his granddaughter that he would return immediately after a quick conversation. Aika drank the juice and never ceased to be surprised. Before this, no one had dared to approach them. And now Cassell was surrounded by a whole crowd of ladies. The ladies did not stop greeting him, but she didn't understand why her uncle didn't answer any of them. Then another girl approached them. It was suspiciously noisy there, so she decided to come and check. Countess Lamond Ella? She had important information for Cassell. Aika thought that this lady was her uncle's girlfriend. Cassell told Aika that he needed to step away. He asked her to behave well and stay close to Gerard. Aika calmly went to Gerard. She could not interfere with her uncle's love. Aika asked Gerard if this beautiful lady was her uncle's girl. Gerard explained to Aika that Cassell and this girl simply had common goals and were going down the same path. Then Aika saw something. She was impressed by the fountain and wanted to sit there. Gerard suggested that she sit at a table, since she could get wet and catch a cold by the fountain. From the table, you could see the water from the fountain falling down. Aika liked it. Aika wanted Cassell to see this beauty. Gerard said that he would return soon and suggested that Aika go to the carriage. But Aika wanted to go with her uncle, so Gerard decided to go and check it out himself. Gerard left. Aika remained alone at the table. The girl noticed Aika. She considered her a little hooligan. Aika was a child who suddenly appeared in the Valliert house and now never left the Marquise's side. Aika couldn't wait for Gerard. She thought about going and looking for him, but she was told to sit still while people were discussing Aika, calling her an illegitimate child. Syria was not married. People thought that she was hiding the child, ashamed of her illegitimate daughter. They were also interested in whether the Marquis was going to marry, since he had taken custody of a child and appeared with her in society, which was strange. But in fact, the girl didn't care, because it was the Marquis of Ligier himself, and such a disadvantage as a child could be ignored. Aika heard all their conversations, but she couldn't understand whether her mother was hiding her. Syria always told her daughter that she was proud of her. The man believed that Ligier did not plan to make Aika his heir. Otherwise, it would have been announced by now. The girl thought that this was impossible, because the girl was born illegally and raised somewhere on the side. Then they started discussing Syria. She was the chancellor of the empire, and she was able to make such a mistake. The girl thought that the Marquise didn't like Aika, and she liked it. Aika came up to them and shouted that her mother never hid her. Aika called them liars. The girl got angry at Aika. Aika said that her mother was always proud of her, and asked them not to talk about things they didn't know. The girl started yelling at Aika, calling her a little brat. The girl told Aika that it was a shame for the family, because it was because of her that the Marquise and Lord Valliart were forced to listen to such things. The girl splashed wine from the glass in Aika's direction and said that she didn't even dare raise her voice at her. The girl believed that Aika should know her place. Then Cassel, who saw everything, came to Aika's aid. The girl's face immediately changed. She was scared. Gerard leaned over to Aika to check if she was okay and called her to follow him. Cassel turned to Gerard and ordered him to take Aika away. The girl tried to understand at what moment Cassel approached. She believed that he could not hear everything. Once Cassel even accepted a glass of wine from this girl, and she still remembered it. Cassel turned to the girl and asked her to continue chatting. Cassel was angry. He didn't understand why the girl was silent, and she didn't understand why he was so rude to her. Cassel told Rosina that she had no right to open her filthy mouth on his child. Cassel also advised Rosina to manage her finances wisely. After this, Cassel left. The man did not understand what he was talking about. Rosina asked Cassel to stop. Soon Cassel approached the carriage. He didn't understand why Aika got out, because it was cold outside. Cassel began to scold Gerard for not keeping an eye on Aika, but Aika stood up for him. Aika told her uncle that during this time, she had time to think and remembered her mother's words. Syria told her daughter that people who insult others without reason live in their own hell, which is why they think they have to hurt others. Aika suggested that Cassel forgive those people, at least this time. After all, they were better than them, so they could forgive them. Cassel gave in to Aika's persuasion. A couple of days passed. Aika thanked her uncle for going with her. Aika was happy. Today they had to go buy a gift for Ruspa, and they would meet again. Aika asked Cassel to show her the area around the market, since she had never walked there. But Cassel didn't want to do this. He planned to buy flowers and move on. Aika began to beg her uncle. She desperately wanted to walk around the fair. Aika was sure it was fun there. She heard that they sold a lot of different dolls and treats there. Cassel promised Aika to show her the fair next time. Soon the carriage stopped. Aika jumped out and promised to go to a place familiar to her. She entered the flower shop where she often went with her mother. The saleswoman was confused. Aika greeted her. The girl ran up to Aika and hugged her. She was glad that Aika was safe and sound. She imagined the pain that Aika had gone through. If the girl had known that this would happen, she would not have let Syria go anywhere that day. Cassel stood to the side and watched Aika. Aika asked the girl if she knew anything about that accident. The girl said that on the eve of the incident, Syria came to see her. She was buying flowers that day. The girl was very glad to see Aika. She thanked her for coming to her. The girl's name was Neri. She called Aika to follow her and asked for whom they would be making a bouquet. Aika said that she wanted to give flowers to her new friend, uncle, grandfather, Gerard and Zenda. Cassel turned to Aika and said that he didn't need flowers, but Aika believes that he will change his mind as soon as he sees the flowers. Neri confirmed Aika's words, saying that they have the best flowers. Soon, Neri collected all the bouquets. She gave Aika a gift and asked her to visit more often. Cassel told Aika that he would go first and asked her to hurry. Aika pointed to the flower and asked Neri to pack it. Neri said that this bouquet was heavy, but Aika didn't care. Aika took a large sunflower with her. Cassel didn't understand why she was dragging a flower that was the same size as her. Aika chose this flower for Cassel. Cassel didn't understand where he should put this huge sunflower. Besides, Aika bought a flower with his money. Aika couldn't get used to the fact that sometimes her uncle could be very harmful. Aika was offended by her uncle and said that he could do whatever he wanted with the flower. Aika and Cassel were approaching the gate, but suddenly the carriage stopped. Cassel went out to ask Gerard what was going on. The thing is that the young lady and gentleman they met yesterday came to see and apologize to Cassel and Aika. Gerard said that he thought they were sincerely asking for forgiveness, but he didn't know what to do. Cassel thought about it. Then he called Aiki and said that they could go together, or she could stay if she did not want to see them. But Aika wanted to go with her uncle. Rosina was glad to see the Marquis again. Then she noticed Aika standing next to him. Then the girl and the man suddenly fell to their knees in front of Aika. The man asked Aika for forgiveness and promised that something like this would not happen again. Rosina agreed with the man and asked Aika and Cassel to show mercy. Then Rosina stood up and said that as a sign of repentance, they had prepared modest gifts. The carriages were filled to the brim with these decorations. They hoped that Aika would accept the gift and feel better. Cassel looked at Aika and asked what she thought about it. He said she didn't have to accept it if she didn't like it. Aika told Rosina that she didn't need gifts. Saria told her daughter that apologizing takes courage. These guys came and admitted their guilt, so she was ready to forgive them. But only on the condition that this does not happen again. Rosita thanked Aika and said that they would never forget her kindness. Soon Aika told this story to Ruspa. Rusp thought that Aika was very hurt by this, but she said that everything was fine. Ruspe turned to Aika and said that he and his mother were simply wonderful. Ruspe thanked Aika for the flowers and promised to cherish them. Ruspe also had a gift for Aika. He handed her the box and asked if she would accept it. Aika was already happy with the gift. She asked Ruspe if she could open the box right now. Rusp gave permission, and Aika began to unpack the gift. Aika looked into the box and screamed with joy. The box contained bunny-shaped slippers, which Aika thought were very cute. Aika thanked Ruspe and promised to bring her from home every day. Rusp was glad that Aika liked his gift. Aika asked Ruspe what they would play today. Ruspe trusted Aika's choice. But suddenly, someone approached the guys and told Rusp that he was wasting time fooling around. After all, this is not how a child born to a high rank should behave. The man was angry. He told Rusp over and over again not to waste time on frivolities. Ruspe turned to the man and apologized, reminding him that today was a day off. But he believed that Rusp could not have days off, since he was preparing to become crown prince. Aika didn't understand what was going on, why Ruspe was apologizing, and what kind of old man he was. Aika was angry because her friend was being bullied right in front of her. The man became disillusioned with Ruspa and decided to take up his upbringing. But then Aika intervened and covered the boy with her body. The man was surprised. He asked Aika what she was doing. Aika asked her grandfather not to offend Ruspe. Coming closer, Aika realized what kind of old man it was. It was Duke Notium, a man close to the Valyart family and His Majesty the Emperor. Saria told her daughter that this man had many qualities worthy of admiration, but she did not understand why he offended Ruspe. Notium asked Aika who she was. Aika introduced herself. The man was surprised. He didn't understand. Was it really not even a secret now? He called Aika a cheeky girl and said that his name was Gale. Aika thought about it, because in the book there was a different name. Aika realized that it was not the Duke himself, but his son. Gale asked Aika if her grandfather hadn't taught her to respect adults. Aika said that she was taught this, and was also taught that adults who offend children are bad. Gale told Aika that she does not understand anything, because Ruspa is going down a difficult path. Aika reminded that Ruspa is only 7 years old, and at that age she needs to explore the world, not just study. Aika said she could go and check with the Emperor, but Gale said that it was not worth doing. Aika asked Gale to stop bullying her friend. The man began to tell Aika that he was not offending anyone, but she did not want to listen to anything and asked him to leave. Suddenly, Ruspe came closer to Aika and grabbed her. The girl got scared. Ruspe thanked Aika, and she told him that everything was fine. The man was in a stupor. He did not understand what the young count was doing. Ruspe stepped forward and reminded that he had never missed classes or fencing and had never done anything disrespectful to His Highness. He asked the man to trust him and promised not to disappoint him. The man decided to retreat, but he asked Rusp not to waste precious time so often. The man also told Aika that this also concerned her. Aika was disappointed, because her mother had only good things to say about the Notium family, but Rusp said that the man was simply worried about him. Aika promised Ruspe to hate the man just a little bit and asked if they would play some more. There was one place that Aika really wanted to go to with Ruspe. Rusp was surprised and became curious about what kind of place this was. Aika brought Ruspe to the archives of the Imperial Palace. Gerard reminded Ike to handle the books with care and asked her to call him if they needed help. Gerard put the key to the archive in Aika's purse and gave it to the girl. Soon Aika was already pulling Ruspe along with her into the depths of the archive. Aika was delighted. There were many different books in the archive. Ruspe was also in this archive for the first time. Aika pointed to the department and called Ruspe there. She thought there would be fairy tales there. Aika noticed that after the conflict with that man, Ruspe looked sad. She wanted to somehow cheer him up. Suddenly, Aika noticed something and was very surprised. The bottom shelf was completely empty. Aika thought she could fit in there. Aika had a great idea. She decided how she would lift Rusp's spirits. She wanted to hide there unnoticed, and then jump out to surprise Rusp. Aika began to climb onto the shelf. Since she was thin, she squeezed through with ease. It looked cramped there, but in fact it turned out to be spacious, and you could easily hide there while playing hide and seek. Then Aika noticed a hole on the other side. She decided that this was the exit and began to climb there. At this time, Ruspa finished examining the shelf and turned towards where Aika stood. But she was no longer there. Rusp was surprised and even a little scared. Ruspe immediately ran to the Marquise to tell him about Aika's disappearance. Cassel immediately noticed that Aika was not with Ruspe, so he asked Gerard what had happened. Gerard began to explain the problem to Cassel. Cassel did not understand what had happened. Had Aika really gone home? Here Gerard told Cassel that Aika had disappeared. Rusp began to tell that they were looking for a book, and then Aika disappeared. He and Gerard looked through the entire archive, but could not find her. Ruspe apologized to Cassel, who asked him not to tremble, and said that it was not his fault. Cassel ordered Gerard to call all the soldiers and bring them to the archives. He didn't understand where Aika could have gone. Cassel wanted only one thing, for Aika to remain safe and sound until he arrived. Cassel was furious and scattered all the soldiers who stood in his way. They asked him to calm down. They involved all the castle soldiers in the search for the young miss. Cassel was very angry. He ordered the soldiers to get out of the way and not interfere with him. The man tried to explain to Cassel that he couldn't burst into the palace like that, as it could be considered treason. Cassel stood his ground and asked the man to leave. Then the emperor approached them. He asked Cassel to calm down. The emperor swore on his title. He was sure that Aika would soon be found. Cassel turned to the emperor and asked him if he really thought he couldn't finish him off. Cassel believed that the emperor was to blame for the disappearance of the nut, since he had given her the key to this archive. The emperor admitted that he had acted rashly. He told Cassel that Aika would not be harmed, and asked Cassel to wait a little longer. Cassel became even more angry about this. He didn't want to wait. After all, first he lost his sister, and now they advise him to stand aside, knowing about the disappearance of his niece. The emperor asked Cassel to trust Syria if he could not rely on him. After all, the key to the archive was left by Syria for Aika, and she would never have given her daughter something dangerous. But the emperor could not refuse Syria this request, and Cassel knew this very well. Cassel released the emperor and told him that he was free for now. Then someone called Cassel and told him that Aika had been found. Ruspe sat and hugged Aika. He was worried about her no less than Cassel. Aika said that she was fine and apologized to Rusp for making him worry. Then Cassel approached Aika, who was incredibly angry. He asked Aika where she had been. Aika said that at first she wanted to surprise Ruspe. Aika wanted to tell what happened next, but she didn't have time. Cassel grabbed his niece and hugged her. Aika was surprised. Cassel told her that she had scared everyone and asked if she was hurt. Cassel was happy. Everything else was unimportant to him. From that day on, Cassel decided to ban Aika from visiting the imperial palace. Aika didn't understand why she wouldn't be able to return here. Cassel was carrying Aika out of the archive, but then Rusp stopped him. He asked the Marquise to take Aika with him next time and promised that she would not disappear again. Cassel said that entry into the palace was forbidden for Aika, but Rusp could come to them. Russi stood his ground. He promised that this would not happen again, and that he would provide her with protection. Cassel froze in place. He felt something. He didn't understand what had happened. There was some kind of energy next to Ruspe. Cassel was sure that it came from him. He promised Rusp to think about it, and reminded the boy that it was time for him to return too. Aika promised Ruspe that she would be a good girl, and they would definitely see each other again. Aika understood that she shouldn't have lied, but she couldn't tell everyone about it either. After all, no one would have believed her that a couple of hours ago, after she climbed onto the shelf, she met a rabbit. Aika was very scared then. She didn't understand who he was and who had just spoken there. The rabbit bowed before Aika and said that there was no one else here to talk to him. The rabbit asked Aika if she knew Syria. Aika didn't understand whether the long-eared one really knew her mother. The rabbit was surprised that Aika was Syria's daughter. Then he introduced himself to Aika. The rabbit's name was Lepus. He was a friend of Syria. Aika didn't know that her mother had a ghostly rabbit friend, but Lepus said that he wasn't a ghost at all. Lepus looked at his watch and told Aika that it was already late. He asked Aika not to go anywhere and promised to return soon. The rabbit ran to the wall and began to walk through it. Aika was speechless. She didn't understand what was going on here. Aika thought that she too could pass through the wall, but it turned out that this was not the case. Soon the rabbit appeared from behind the wall again, but this time with some kind of sign in its teeth. Lepus handed the tablet to Aika and said that it was left by Syria. Aika took the stone and asked Lepus what it was. The rabbit said that it was him. Lepus explained to Aika that he was sealed in this slab. Syria, being a seeker, was able to find this tablet and awaken Lepus. Aika didn't understand anything. The rabbit asked her if her mother hadn't told her that she was a researcher. Aika said that this was the first time she had heard about this and told us that her mother had recently passed away. Lepus understood what was going on. One day Syria told him something. She warned him that one day someone important to her would come to him, but he didn't expect that Aika would be so small. Syria asked Lepus to tell Aika everything and protect her from the predator when the day came. Aika didn't understand what Lepus was talking about. Then he pointed to the wall for Aika and asked her to look carefully. Soon some notes started flashing in front of Aika. Predators or hunters were people who were very dangerous. Initially, there was a god who maintained the balance of the world, but one day he disappeared, leaving in his place a being called the Absolute. He was supposed to act on behalf of the god, who preserved 10 relics imbued with divine power, called the Hierateka. But this being could not cope with what surpassed the god, so the Absolute entrusted the relics to the researchers, the messengers of the Lord. They worked to maintain peace, but the peace did not last long. Those who envied the Seekers began to hunt them and steal the relics. It was then that the predators appeared, whose power has remained to this day. Even now, Seekers seek relics, and predators seekers. Aik inherited her mother's powers as an explorer, and could now be hunted as well. Lepus asked Aika not to be afraid, because he promised Syria that he would protect someone important to her. Aika asked Lepus how he was going to protect her. Lepus said that after the Seeker awakens the sleeping relic, it can grant him special abilities. Besides Lepus, Syria awakened many relics and acquired their powers, such as being able to bind people's feet. In bad weather, it could provide shelter from the rain. Aika was delighted that her mother had such abilities. Aika told the rabbit that she received the gift of seeing the future when she ate the pebble. The rabbit was surprised that Syria gave her daughter power by making her eat a pebble, but he quickly realized what was going on. He said that Syria most likely pulled out the energy by force. Aika did not understand anything. The rabbit said that she needed to develop her abilities and collect relics to resist the hunters. The predators were not endowed with such abilities, but they could recognize the Seeker. They harmed the Seekers and took away their skills. To get rid of them, the Seeker must learn to use abilities correctly and hide the aura. Lepus told Aika that she had already met Serpens, but she had not been able to awaken him properly. Aika didn't understand what the rabbit was talking about. Lepus said that he was talking about a snake with a red eye. Aika remembered that incident with the dream and understood what Lepus was talking about. Lepus said that it was not a dream, and Aika needed to wake him up quickly to survive. But Aika didn't know what she needed to do. Lepus explained that she needed to call the snake by name. Aika didn't understand whether she really needed to do this now. She was scared because that snake looked creepy. Lepus suddenly said that they didn't have time. He felt something frightening behind the door and thought that Aika needed to go back. He asked Aika to hurry up so that she wouldn't be scolded even more. Aika again did not understand what Lepus was talking about. He told her to go and find out everything and pushed Aika into the passage. Several days passed. Aika was at her uncle's estate. She sat and did not understand what to do. It was impossible to put off what she had started. She remembered Lepus's words about how to awaken Serpens. Aika didn't understand whether the snake from the dream would appear if she awakened the relic. Then Aika was very scared when she saw Serpens. Aika tuned herself in and said the snake's name, but then her uncle entered her room. Aika was taken aback and screamed. Cassel asked Aika what was wrong with her. She explained that she was scared because he came in suddenly. Cassel told Aika that he would be visiting the imperial palace for a short while, so he wanted to tell Aika to have lunch without him. Aika, having heard about the palace, began to ask to go with her uncle, but he did not want to take her. Aika didn't understand why, because then he said that he would think about it. Cassel explained that he said he would think about it, but he had no intention of taking her with him, so Aika could forget about his promise. Aika understood that at this rate she would never get to the palace, and she wanted to see Lepus and the emperor. Cassel did not want to bring Aika to the palace because of the danger she found herself in last time. The emperor understood Cassel perfectly, but he wanted to fulfill Syria's wish. Aika could at least freely come and go to the archives. It seemed to Cassel that the emperor spoke as if he had some kind of plan. The emperor handed Cassel a piece of paper with an image and asked him to look at it. The emperor asked Cassel what he thought about this. All exits and entrances for Aika were free and safe. Cassel didn't understand whether it was okay to install something like this in the imperial palace, because if the nobles found out about it, there would be an uproar. The emperor said they would keep it a secret. He and Rusp missed Aika. He suggested that Cassel visit the palace officially until they finished the installation. At this time, Aika waited for her uncle to leave and decided to try again. Aika shouted the snake's name loudly, but nothing happened. Aika decided to wait a little. Then she shouted the snake's name a couple more times and looked around. Suddenly, Aika found herself in a room that wasn't hers. She didn't understand what was happening. A second ago, she was in the room, and now she couldn't breathe. Aika thought it was because she called Serpens. She asked Serpens why he was doing this to her. She wanted him to answer. A moment later, a large snake appeared above Aika's bed, the one she had seen in her dream. Aika was very scared again, but after a couple of seconds, she saw a small snake with a red eye, which asked if she had called her. Aika was shocked. She froze and stared at the snake. Aika didn't understand anything, because a couple of seconds ago, there was a huge and scary snake above her. So Aika awakened Serpens, and he introduced himself to the girl. Aika noticed that his eye color was the same as the color of the pebble she swallowed. But Aika couldn't even imagine that Serpens would be so small and cute. Aika introduced herself to Serpens and asked if he could see the future. Serpens realized that Lepus had told her about it. Aika said that she got this skill from a stone that was similar to the color of his eyes and decided that there was a connection. The stronger Aika is, the more accurate the chosen person's future will be. Aika would have to put in a lot of effort, but she didn't have to worry. She called on Serpens to help her with this. Aika wanted to tell Lopez about her meeting with Serpens, but she couldn't get into the archives. Aika heard the sound of a carriage and realized that her uncle was already home. Serpens asked her if this man could definitely bring her to the palace. Aika didn't know for sure, because her uncle would definitely not agree, but she wanted to try to persuade him. Aika was serious about returning to the palace to Lopez. Cassel again did not allow Aika to go to the palace. Cassel scolded Aika and asked what kind of mess she was trying to drag him into this time. The servant stood up for Aika. Aika decided to change the subject and said that she wanted to write a letter to Ruspa to invite him to her place. Cassel decided to allow Aika to invite Ruspi to visit him. Starting next week, Cassel decided to hire a tutor for Aika. He decided it was time for her to come to her senses. Aika decided to ask Cassel about something else. She wanted to visit the house where she used to live with her mother. Aika was sure that there was something there that her mother left, like Lepus or Serpens. Cassel promised Aika to take her there later, when everything had calmed down. Cassel asked Aika not to impose difficult conditions on him, because she couldn't even imagine how much one of his trips would cost. Aika promised her uncle to kiss him on the cheek if he listened to her. Cassel was confused, and the servants who heard the conversation were also surprised. Cassel didn't understand what this had to do with anything. Aika explained that her mother told her that her kiss was worth $1 million. She thought that if she used one on her uncle, it would work very well. Cassel told Aika that if she gave him a couple of kisses, he would definitely think about it. Aika considered Cassel stingy, but he didn't understand whether she really thought her uncle was worth less. Aika realized that she had no other option and asked her uncle to bend over a little. Cassel leaned over, and Aika kissed him on the cheek. Then Aika kissed Cassel 2 more times. Cassel didn't understand why Aika kissed him 3 times. Aika said that the third was a gift. Cassel asked Aika if she was trying to appease him because she had done something wrong again. Aika said no. Aika went to write a letter to Ruspe. Cassel asked her not to run away far. Aika wrote to Ruspe. She asked how he was doing and said that she wanted to have more fun with him, but they always had little time. So he invites him to his place to make a delicious cake and have some fun. They could explore the garden and have fun playing. Aika wrote that she would wait for an answer. Soon Ruspe received the letter and read it. Ruspe sat in his room and read Aika's letter. Then someone approached him and asked Ruspe if this letter was from young Miss Valyert. It was Father Ruspe. He asked his son what the letter was about. Rusp said that Aika was inviting him to her place. The man found it suspicious that the chancellor's illegitimate child had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He advised his son not to go to the Legier estate. Ruspe was surprised. The father asked him not to ask the reason and not to go to Ayaka without need, and began to leave. Ruspe suddenly told his father that his friendship with Ayika was necessary. The man was surprised and stopped to listen to his son. Ruspe explained that House Valiart was loyal to the emperor, and he felt this was an excellent opportunity to strengthen ties between the families. Ruspe also said that, in addition to this, he is indebted to Aika. The father was unhappy with his son because he forgot his place because he got involved with Valiart. Rusp said that, contrary to rumors, there was much to learn from the Marquise of Legier, and he asked his father to allow him to go. The man was surprised, because his son had never argued with him before. He allowed his son to do as he wished, but asked him not to discredit the name of the Kelpodius family. Ruspe was very scared, because today he contradicted his father for the first time, but he was glad that now he would be able to see Aika again. Ruspe noticed that the more often he met with Aika, the more he changed. Ruspe couldn't say that he didn't like it. The longer he didn't see Aika, the more he wanted to see her. But if only Rusp knew what danger Aika would be exposed to, he would not have come because he would have considered it the best solution. Several days passed. Rusp stood in front of Aika and thanked her for the invitation. He handed her the gift. Aika thanked him. Ruspe started telling Ika about the hairstyle that Kamai had done for him, and it seemed strange to him. Aika told Ruspa that his hairstyle was very cute and suited him very well. Aika pulled Ruspe along with her, asking if he had ever tried making a cake. Aika decided that today they would bake a cake and go on a picnic with the dessert they made themselves. Soon Ayaka and Ruspe, already dressed, were standing in the kitchen. The cook, having examined them, said that then they could begin. The children began to decorate their cakes. Aika admired Ruspe's work. He did it very well. Rusp said that there was nothing unusual. He thought that anyone could do the same. But then he looked at Ayaka's cake, which was not quite perfect. Rusp decided to support his friend and said that her cake was more original and even better. Aika noticed cream on Rusp's face and decided to wipe it off. Then the cook entered the room and asked the boys if it was time to finish. The cook was surprised that the children had not yet finished decorating their cakes. The cook said she brought them chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla flavors. Soon Aika and Ruspe went out into the yard to have a picnic. Aika really liked the cake. Ruspe was also delighted. Zenda, who accompanied the boys, said that the cake is even better when you make it yourself. Zenda was forced to leave the boys alone to go get drinks. Aika remembered that she wanted to show Ruspa something cute. Aika took out the bag that her mother made. She thought it was very beautiful. There were a lot of important things in the bag. There were even some candies. She gave a couple to Ruspa. Aika showed Ruspa the lake and invited him to play near it. Then suddenly, a bird flew up from a branch and snatched the bag from Aika's hands. Aika couldn't lose her bag, because inside was her contract with her uncle. Ruspe was scared. He asked Aika to stop and not run away. Ruspe ran after Aika, but stumbled and fell. Soon Aika was able to find her bag. It was hanging on a branch that was above the lake. Aika was glad that the bird dropped the bag. It seemed to her that she could reach it with her hand. Aika almost reached the bag, but slipped and fell into the water. Aika was scared. She couldn't breathe again. She called for help from her mother, uncle, and Ruspe. She hoped that someone would definitely help her. At this time, Ruspe was trying to do something to help Aika. Here, Aika felt that she could breathe again. She was very surprised. Soon, Ruspe pulled Aika out of the lake. Aika was surprised. She didn't understand whether it was really Ruspe who saved her. Suddenly, Ruspe grabbed his head and screamed. Aika immediately began asking if he was okay. Ruspe told Aika that he was fine, just a little dizzy. Ruspe told Aika that it was he who pulled her out of the lake. Aika immediately began asking Ruspe how he did it. Ruspe replied that he used magic. Aika was surprised. She thought that magic only existed in fairy tales, but Ruspe told her that there were few people in the world who possessed magic, and he asked Aika to keep it a secret. Aika realized that Ruspe was one of those people. Rusp took Aika's bag out of his pocket and handed it to her. Rusp took the bag and sewed it up with magic. Aika rushed to Ruspe and began to thank him. Ruspe felt embarrassed and told Aika that he couldn't do otherwise, since this bag was very important to her. Ruspe once again asked Aika to promise to keep everything a secret, as problems could arise. Aika promised that she wouldn't tell anyone, Her mother told her that sometimes you need to hide things even from your loved ones. Eika and Ruspe were still near the lake. Zenda could not find them. Through their conversations, the boys heard her voice and realized that they had forgotten to return. Eika decided that she would also confide one of her secrets to Ruspe. She said that she had two loose teeth, an upper and a lower one. Zenda knew about the upper one, but only Rusp knew about the lower one. Zenda told Ayeka that she would have to have her tooth pulled, but Ayeka didn't want to, so she hid it. Time passed. Kassel hired a tutor for Aika, and Aika began to study diligently. Aika quickly found answers to the teacher's questions. The history teacher, Koil Veneta, the woman finished her lesson and gave Aika homework. Aika's next lesson was supposed to be the imperial language, but something happened to the teacher. So Aika's lessons were finished for today. Aika said goodbye to the teacher and asked her to take care of herself. Then, Serpens called Ayaka and reminded her that he had told her not to use her powers for such things. After all, the gift was needed to protect oneself. Aika should have used it only in cases of extreme necessity. Kassel never took Aika to the palace, and she hadn't seen Rusip for a long time either, as he was busy. So Aika began special training with Serpens. After hard work, Aika got a little used to the abilities. But there was one thing. Aika trained in a corner of the estate's garden, with Serpens giving her various tasks. Aika had to train a lot to see the future. She had to learn to read auras well. Serpens explained to Aika that each person has their own energy, and as an example, he took her to a place where there are many servants. Entering the courtyard, Serpens asked Aika if she understood now, but Aika was not sure. Serpens realized that it was still difficult for Aika, but she could learn through training. Aika began to concentrate to sense the other person's aura, but suddenly someone approached her. It was Reto. He asked Aika what she was doing here. Aika said that it was not quite like that, and asked Rito where he was heading. Reto told Aika that he had just finished with the master's errand and was reporting to him. Aika asked Rito if her name was on the report. Rito replied that it indicated the amount of funds allocated for her. Aika told Reto that her uncle told her that she was ruining him and asked Reto if that was why there were so many zeros. Reto laughed and told Aika that Kassel was just teasing her, and she wouldn't ruin her uncle even if she asked for a golden carriage. Aika turned away and told Rito that the golden carriage was too much. Here Aika felt Reto's energy. Everything around him was glowing with red light. Aika felt uneasy. Rito rushed to her and began to find out what had happened. He grabbed Aika by the hand so that she wouldn't fall and lose consciousness. But Aika broke free from Rito's hands and ran away from him. Rito stood there, not understanding what had just happened. Moving away from Rito, Aika spoke to Serpens, who asked if she had seen the aura. Aika said that she noticed a red glow. Serpens explained that this was the aura, but Aika did not see any predictions. Serpens advised Aika to try looking at Rito's back. Aika turned to Rito and stared at his back, so Aika was able to look into the future. Aika told Serpens that she would need his help now. Kassel scolded Rito. He asked for a report, but never received it. Rito was sure that he left the report on the table. Kassel was furious. He didn't understand whether the report had grown legs, and he ran away. Rito promised Kassel to prepare another report by the morning. Reto was in despair. He was facing a sleepless night. Aika was glad. Her plan had worked, at least for today. Now she needed to buy as much time as possible. Aika burst into her uncle's office with some paper. Kassel sat at the table and checked the documents that Rito had prepared. Reto asked Aika why she was in such a hurry. Did she really have some urgent matter? Aika unfolded the paper and asked her uncle and Rito to look at it. There were rumors that there were a lot of thieves. They broke into empty houses, stole things, and maimed people. Aika advised Rito to inspect his house before going inside. Reto asked Aika not to worry and said that he was stronger than he looked, but Aika still stood her ground. Kassel couldn't stand it and grabbed his niece. He sent her to play with Zenda. Kassel also told Aika that starting tomorrow she would live with her grandfather for a while. Kassel needed to go away, so he sent Aika to her grandfather for a week. Aika didn't understand whether she had done the right thing. Serpens said that even if Rito hadn't understood the warning, Aika would still have received a reprieve. Aika understood that she had done everything she could. She hoped that Rito was safe. At night, Rito returned home. He was bothered by Aika's behavior. She was constantly hanging around the office, as if she was stalling for time. Reto thought it was because Aika was small and full of curiosity. In any case, Rito was pleased and decided to be on the alert just in case. As soon as Rito entered the house, he noticed a stranger on the stairs. Rito ran after the man to find out who it was. Having gone up to the second floor, Rito found no one. He stood there and did not understand what had happened. Rito noticed that all the locks on the doors were broken. He realized that whoever was in the house was looking for something specific. Rito was obliged to report this to the Marquise, so he immediately set off back. Rito told the Marquis that some stranger had entered his house at night. Judging by the tracks, there were 3 people. Rito has already asked to start an investigation. Rito told Kaisel that he was lucky, because after Aika's warning, he entered the house with caution. Rito left. Kaisel was left alone. It all seemed strange to him. The newspaper collage that Aika made contained suspicious details. For example, the newspaper wrote about a thief, but Aika replaced him with attackers. Black hair was replaced with brown hair, and women with men, and Aika replaced one person with 3. If we look at it with Aika's adjustments, it perfectly matched what happened in Rito's house. Cassell decided that all this was nonsense and a coincidence and threw the paper away. Cassell believed that his girl could not see the future. The next day, Aika arrived at the Valyart estate. She was incredibly happy to see her grandfather again. Cassell warned Aika that he had brought all the teachers here with her, and that instead of candy, she would be gnawing on the granite of science. Cassell warned Aika that her imperial language teacher had changed. Grandfather began to ask Aika what she wanted. He was ready to do anything for her. Aika was delighted and wanted to tell her grandfather that she wanted to go to the imperial palace. But then Cassell came running to them and asked Aika if they were talking about the imperial palace. Aika quickly got out of the situation by saying that she wanted to ride in a golden carriage. Aika tried to hint to her grandfather that she didn't need any carriage, but he didn't understand. She couldn't ask him to take her directly to the emperor while Cassell was nearby. Here, the grandfather told Ayaka that the literature teacher who would work with her had already arrived. Aika's teacher of the imperial language turned out to be a middle-aged man, Belfoy Logis. The man began the lesson, asking Aika to call him simply Logis, and asked how she was doing with her language skills. Aika already knew how to write a little. Logis asked her to write down all the words she knew. Aika wrote her mother's name, her grandfather's name, and her uncle's name. Aika wanted to write the name of the bunny and the snake, but she didn't know how to spell it correctly. Logis thought that Aika had finished and asked to let him look at the piece of paper. Logis took the piece of paper from Aika before she even had time to say a word. Logis realized that Aika could only write the names of family members. He expected more from the daughter of the former chancellor. Aika was confused. She didn't understand why the teacher started talking about her mother. Logis told Aika that she must make every effort not to disgrace the Duke and Marquise. After a while, Zenda entered the room and asked Aika if she liked the lesson. Zenda told Logis that the lesson could be finished. Logis felt sorry to end the lesson so early. Logis asked Aika to study hard and said goodbye to her. Serpens asked Aika if she really had nothing to say, but Aika didn't understand what he was talking about. Serpens was referring to that teacher. He didn't understand why Ayaka wouldn't tell her grandfather about it. Serpens was angry because Logis even mentioned Syria. Aika, of course, was upset, but she understood the teacher because she really did lack knowledge. Syria was more diligent than Castle, but every time she got into trouble, a huge scandal ensued. For example, when, despite the rumors after her disappearance, she remained steadfast, or when she suddenly returned with a baby in her arms. Then she was not home for 2 years. She disappeared without saying a word. No one knew anything about her. Then, Syria only apologized to her father and said that she couldn't tell him anything. Ilid considered Syria a fool who did not respect him because she had passed away before him. Despite everything, Ilad promised his daughter to take care of Aika's safety. Then, Aika entered her grandfather's room. Ilid did not understand what brought Aika to him at such a late hour. Aika said that she wanted to go somewhere with him. Ilad told his granddaughter that he would take her anywhere. Aika told her grandfather that she wanted to go to the imperial palace. Ilid was at a loss. He didn't know what to say. Cassell warned his father and asked him not to take Aika to the palace under any circumstances. He tried to persuade his granddaughter to go to his library, but Aika asked to go to the archives. Aika said that she wanted to study the books in the place that her mother left for her. As soon as Aika started talking about her mother, Her grandfather became touched. He realized that Aika really wanted to go to the archive. Ilid promised to take his granddaughter if she promised to play only within the archive. Aika agreed to the conditions and was soon getting ready to go to the palace. Aika thanked Zenda for the beautiful clothes and hairstyle, and then said goodbye and left. Aiki arrived at the palace. Her grandfather gave her the key to the archive and said that he would leave her for a while. Aika promised her grandfather that she would be at the archive and thanked him for bringing her here. Zenda reminded Aika that she was strictly forbidden to run away without permission, and Aika promised that she would not go anywhere. Serpens felt that Lepus was somewhere nearby. The relics could sense each other. Aika had already arrived at the imperial palace. Now she only needed to enter. But she couldn't do it because Zenda was watching her closely. Aika told Serpens about this and asked how they could get rid of her. Serpens told Aika that he had a plan and asked her to trust him. Suddenly, books began to fall from the shelves in front of Zenda. Serpens distracted Zenda and gave Aika a chance to escape. Aika got to Lepus, but didn't understand why this time she seemed to fall from above. Serpens told her that this is how travel between spaces works. Soon Lepus ran out to Aika. Aika told Lepus that she had come for a short time and that she would have to go soon. Lepus asked Aika to wait a little. He wanted to help her. Lepus took out some book and started looking for the necessary information. Lepus set the right time, then connected the outer part to the inner one. This way, Lepus was able to create the illusion that Aika was standing in the archive. Lepus connected her shell from another time and shows it as an afterimage. Lepus said it didn't look quite perfect, but others shouldn't have noticed the change. Now that the problem was solved, Lepus asked Aika to tell him what had happened. Lepus admired Aika. She had grown so much that she could see the future better. Aika asked Lepus how she could recognize and defeat a hunter if she encountered him. Lepus thought. He didn't know how to explain this to Aika. Soon Lepus took a book from the shelf that told about hunters, but it was written in an ancient language. The title of the book is Lawless Robber Predator. Even before their abilities awaken, predators instinctively chase the aura of relics. If a seeker has discovered a relic, he must not miss the moment when a shudder runs through the body. This means that the predator is already close. Lepus said that Syria said that when she saw a hunter or a trap, her feelings intensified. Lepus asked Aika if she ever shook or felt cold for no apparent reason. Aika remembered the incident that happened in the garden. She told Lepus that she felt something similar. Lepus was surprised because it happened so early. With Aika, it happened very quickly, because if her style had become known, then something could have happened before that. Although Lepus did not consider Serpens a reliable assistant, Aika's sensitivity should have increased with him. Lepus looked at his watch and realized that time had already passed. He told Aika that it was time for her to return, because if she continued for too long, the illusion might become implausible. Aika was about to leave, but Lepus stopped her. He had one more question. He wondered why Serpens spoke in such a strange voice. Serpens was angry with Lepus because he wanted to keep it a secret from Aika. He didn't understand whether Lepus would ever be able to shut up or not. He even thought about eating him. Lepus explained that Serpens' voice was originally much lower, and he didn't speak in such an annoying tone. Aika didn't mind Serpens' voice, but she decided to check if it was true. Serpens had to confess everything. He hid his voice from Aika, not for his own benefit. Aika was very scared when she first met him, so he decided to speak more softly so as not to seem scary. Aika heard Serpens' real voice. She was delighted. Serpens' voice was very low. Aika realized that Serpens had spoken like that and had changed his tone for her sake. Aika told Serpens that she wouldn't be afraid even if he grew bigger. She thought Serpens' voice was cool and asked him to speak in a way that suited him. Aika was returning back. She was happy. Aika was finally able to see Lepus. First, she decided to go back before her uncle noticed her absence. But as soon as Aika climbed out, she immediately saw Cassel in front of her. Cassel, of course, was glad to see his beloved niece, but he did not understand why she was not at home. Aika didn't understand why her uncle was there, but Cassel asked her what would happen if she didn't listen to him. Aika was confused and said that she had forgotten. Cassel decided to remind Aika what happens when she doesn't listen to him. He grabbed Aika and carried her towards the exit of the archive. Aika was already in the carriage. She was surprised, because she expected her uncle to start scolding her. But from the moment they got into the carriage, Cassel did not say a word. Aika was tense about this silence. She wanted her uncle to tell her at least something, Aika decided to start the conversation first. She asked her uncle if he was very angry. Cassell asked Aika if she really considered this a conversation. Cassell didn't understand what to do with such a naughty child, because nothing helped. Aika noticed that her uncle's gaze became warmer. She thought that he was no longer angry. Cassell asked Aika if she was really happy that what she had planned had worked out. But Aika told her uncle that she simply loved him. Aika decided to ask her uncle why he returned so early. Cassell said that a bird sang to him that one nut was not listening and was running around wherever it wanted. Cassell asked Aika if everything was okay in his absence. Aika replied that everything was fine. Aika tried to appease her uncle so that he would forgive her and not scold her. Cassell thought about it. He didn't know whether to forgive Aika or not. A couple of days passed, and in the morning, Aika burst into her uncle's room and started waking him up. Cassell picked up Aika and sent her to the dining room. He needed to get dressed. Soon Cassell came out into the hall, but did not see Aika there. He didn't understand where she had gone, because a couple of minutes ago she had complained to him about being hungry. But then Aika appeared behind Cassell. Aika ran for a leaflet. It said that a new museum had opened. Serpents told Ike that there was a lot of stuff in that museum, so there could be artifacts there. Aika asked her uncle to take her there, citing the fact that there were many strange and outlandish things there. Aika also suggested taking Ruspi with her. Cassell promised to think about it. Cassell decided to take Aika to the museum and allowed her to take Ruspa with her. Aika was happy. She was going to finish her dessert and tell Serpents about it. Time passed. Aika and Cassell were getting ready to go for Ruspe, and then to the museum. But then Cassell noticed that Aika was covering her mouth with her hand. Cassell asked Aika what happened. Aika got nervous and said that the tooth was not loose at all. Half an hour ago, Zenda examined Aika's teeth. Her tooth was moving more than before. Zenda was going to tell Cassell about this, but Aika begged her not to do it, because then her uncle would pull out her tooth and start teasing her even more. Zenda thought it was funny. She told Aika that her uncle, on the contrary, would be happy to hear about the tooth, because it was a sign that Aika was growing. But Aika still begged Zenda not to tell her uncle about the tooth yet. Zenda promised Aika that everything would be fine, but Aika was unsure of this, because her uncle loved to make fun of her. Soon Aika arrived at the Rusp estate. Aika got out of the carriage and entered the courtyard, where Rusp was already waiting for her. The boys were ready to go to the museum and find all the clues there. Rusp was grateful to Aika for deciding to invite him along. Cassell looked at the boys and couldn't figure out who Aika was so stupid after. Upon entering the museum, Cassell asked the children not to misbehave and not to get into trouble. There were a lot of interesting things in the museum. Aika was delighted. She had never seen anything like it. Ruspe began to tell Aika about a ceramic object that had been taken from the depths of the East 100 years ago. Aika stood and looked at Rusp with admiration, which made him nervous. Aika didn't understand how he figured out what it was. Rusp replied that he simply analyzed and looked, but in fact he was told about it. Aika was delighted with how much Rusp knew. Then Cassell suddenly appeared in front of the children. Aika asked him to leave because she wanted to be with Ruspe, but Cassell did not leave at all and even offered Aika to play. Cassell noticed that Rusp was interested in Aika, but it seemed to him that it was too early. The museum tour began. Aika and Ruspi walked around and looked at the artifacts. Aika had a lot of fun at the museum, especially because Rusp explained everything to her. Then Aika suddenly felt something. There was a beautiful, shiny, horseshoe-shaped decoration on the display case. Aika wanted to take this decoration with her, but someone approached her from behind. She felt it. A shudder ran through her body. Aika decided that this was a hunter, which she should be wary of. Aika was bored to get out of the museum. He shouldn't have found them. Then her uncle and Rusp approached her. Cassell did not understand why Aika suddenly froze in place. Aika turned around and told her uncle that she was okay. Aika calmed down, because she was able to change the future. Cassell asked Aika not to lag behind them, because she wanted to buy souvenirs. Serpents confirmed Aika's suspicions. There really was a hunter in the museum. For now, they just needed to avoid him. Aika told her uncle that she needed to go to the toilet and said that she would catch up with him later. Aika asked her uncle to buy her a horseshoe that she had her eye on. Cassell took Aika's horseshoe, but he didn't understand why she chose it, because there were so many different ones, and she chose the ugliest one. Then Rusp approached Cassell and said that he also wanted a horseshoe. Then someone approached Cassell. He was not particularly happy to see this person there. Duke Deslin himself stood before Cassel. He was surprised to see the young Lord of Kelpodia standing with Casel, but the Duke did not notice the Marquise's young niece, whom the Marquise treasured so much. Cassel tensed up. He didn't understand what relation Ica had to the Duke at all. The Duke replied that he was simply curious, and said that it was time for him to go. Cassel didn't understand what this slippery guy was doing in the museum. He had ruined his whole mood. Cassel and Ruspe sat at the entrance to the museum and ate ice cream. Then Ica ran up to them. Cassel didn't understand why she was taking so long. He was already about to send divers to her. Cassel gave Ica the souvenir that she asked him to buy. Ica took the horseshoe and began to examine it. It seemed different to her, and in her vision it shimmered. Ruspe approached Ica and said that he had fun with her, and next time he would take her somewhere. The day passed. Ica was sitting in the office and waiting for the teacher. Serpensa was with Ica. Ica was so carried away by the horseshoe that it seemed to him that she would wear a hole in it. Serpens was sorry that he couldn't find the artifact in the museum, but he didn't expect it to be easy. Then there was a knock on the office door. It was Belfoy Logis. For today, he prepared training material for Ica. She had to practice by copying words from the book into a notebook. Logis stood and watched Ica. Then he decided to ask her something. He heard that the former chancellor was very close to His Majesty. Logis wondered if Ica had ever met the emperor. Ica felt uneasy. She didn't understand why he was asking her this. Serpens advised Ica to say no. Ica listened to him. Ica told Logis that she had never seen the emperor. Logis asked if she hadn't received the letter either. Ica decided to lie to the end. She didn't understand what was happening, because the conversations about her mother had nothing to do with the lesson. Logis realized that the emperor's interest in Ica was less than he had expected. Logis wanted to ask something else, but Ica interrupted him. She asked Logis how her mother was connected to their lesson. Logis realized that he had let his guard down because of her naive appearance. Logis said that speaking is an integral part of learning. He assumed that Ica had already been to social events, but Ica said that she had not attended them. Logis told Ica that she shouldn't be ashamed of it, and that it was better late than never. Ica didn't understand if there was anything bad about it. Logis told Ica that he was a very reliable person, and she could tell him everything. Serpens told Ica that he felt that this teacher was talking a lot of nonsense, and was not teaching Ica the language at all. Logis finished the lesson. He was tired, because it was always difficult for him with children. And it also seemed to Logis that the Marquise had not yet figured out the plan. Logis needed to find proof that Ica was the emperor's illegitimate child. One person asked him about it. Serpens still asked Ica to tell the adults about this suspicious teacher. Ica asked Serpens not to be angry, because everything was fine with her. But Serpens was worried about Ica. Ica suddenly heard something. He asked Serpens about this, but he didn't hear anything. Ica heard the sound of a horse. She thought it was her uncle. But from this room, it was impossible to hear what was happening in the yard. Ica was absolutely sure that she heard the sound of a horse. She was upset, because she was already happy that her uncle had arrived. After this, Ica went to bed. In her sleep, Ica began to hear the horse again. She thought that her uncle had arrived after all. Here Ica woke up from this sound, looked at the nightstand, and was very scared. The sound she heard came from the horseshoe. Ica quickly began to wake up Serpens, who did not understand what had happened. Serpens was angry. He was not particularly happy to see the light. Then he turned to the horseshoe. It had very strong energy. He thought it was an ordinary souvenir, but now he realized that it could be a relic. Serpens offered to wake her up, but she wasn't sure, because she needed to know the name. Ica took the horseshoe in her hands, and it immediately went out. Serpens suggested that Ica visit the archive and find at least an approximate name. Ica wasn't sure that Cassel would let her go. Serpens really wanted to go to the archive. He wanted to awaken their first find. He also said that no one had ever found a relic so quickly. Then Cassel entered Ica's room. He didn't understand why Ica wasn't sleeping yet. Ica said that she had just woken up. Cassel asked Ica if she was suffering from insomnia. Cassel took Ica and said that if she stayed up late, she would not grow up. Ica told her uncle that Zenda tells her that she is growing very well, and that she is already even taller than Ruspe. Ica stared at Cassel, who didn't understand why she was looking at him so intently. Ica told her uncle that she wanted to ask him for something. Cassel guessed that Ica again wanted to ask to be taken to the imperial palace. After all, lately Ica has been talking about nothing but this. Aika asked her uncle to take her with him this time. Cassel told Aika that perhaps he would let her take a peek at something before going to bed. Cassel took Aika to the dungeon. Aika did not understand anything because Zenda told her that there was nothing interesting there. Having gone deeper into the dungeon, Aika noticed a strange structure there. Cassel told Aika that this was a teleportation artifact. With its help, Aika could go straight to the Imperial archives. Aika didn't understand whether her uncle would now stop her from going to the palace. Cassel said that he understood that one prohibition would not stop her. If he refused, she would pester her grandfather until he broke. Cassel asked Aika to be careful during her visit to the archive and said that it was a gift from him and from the emperor. Cassel stood and tried to explain something to Aika, but she didn't listen to him. She began to hug her uncle and thank him. Aika promised her uncle that now she would really obey him. Cassel thought that this was indeed the best solution, since this route was safer for Aika. A few days ago, the Imperial Palace. The emperor sat and reasoned that it seemed to him that someone had taken aim at Aika. Cassel was in complete agreement with the emperor. Initially, there was that terrible accident with the carriage in which Aika was riding with Syria. Then they attacked the Valyart estate, just when Aika was visiting her grandfather. And just recently, the teacher of the imperial language died in an accident. The emperor promised Siri and wanted to install the artifact as soon as possible, so that in case of danger, Aika could immediately escape to the palace. But all he had to do was get permission from Cassel. Aika was delighted, because now she could get into the archive directly from the basement of her house. Since it was already late, Cassel promised Aika that he would teach her how to use the portal tomorrow. Morning came. Cassel explained to Aika how the portal worked. She only needed to press one button. Cassel pressed the button, and the platform lit up with a bright light. Aika stood in the center with Cassel, and they were immediately transported to the archives of the Imperial Palace. There, Aika saw the emperor, who was standing and waiting for them. The emperor said that he heard that Cassel was so protective of Aika that he never let her go anywhere. He thought that Cassel explained to her what was going on. The emperor told Aika that he had made it so that she could come to the archives freely. The emperor asked Aika to spare him a little time when she was hungry. He wanted to arrange a tea party. Aika liked this idea and promised the emperor to come. Soon Aika came to the tea party. She was impressed, because there were many treats on the table. It all seemed like paradise to Aika, because at home, her uncle forbade her to eat sweets, saying that they ruined her teeth. The emperor allowed Aika to eat as many sweets as her heart desired. Aika started eating sweets, but didn't take one very important point into account. Her tooth was holding on with all its might. The emperor noticed that Aika had stopped eating and asked her if it wasn't tasty. Aika put all the treats aside and covered her mouth with her hands. Aika, frightened, told the emperor that she tasted blood in her mouth. The emperor was frightened. He could not understand what could have happened. The emperor ordered that a doctor be called immediately, but Aika stopped him and said that everything was fine. The emperor thought that there was something in the cookie, and Aika got hurt, but Aika began to explain to him the real reason. Aika told the emperor that she had lost a tooth and showed it to him. The emperor expected anything but this, but he was glad that nothing serious happened. The emperor gave Aika a handkerchief and asked her to hold it in her mouth. He himself was going to call Cassel. Aika asked the emperor not to tell her uncle about this, but he didn't understand why. He thought that Cassel would also be happy. Aika decided to destroy all the evidence so that her uncle would not find out about anything. Aika wanted to throw out the tooth, but the emperor stopped her. He offered to hand this matter over to him. Aika trusted the emperor and gave him the tooth, but asked him not to show it to Cassel. In the evening, Aika and Cassel went home. Cassel decided to go by carriage, since Aika had not been to the palace for a long time. He wanted to show her the surroundings. Aika said goodbye to the emperor and hurried to the carriage. Cassel didn't understand why Aika was so eager to go home, since she had been asking to go to the palace. The emperor turned to Cassel. The emperor had something for him. Even though the emperor had agreed to remain silent, he couldn't help but give the tooth to Aiki Cassel, because keeping such a secret would be a crime. The emperor asked Cassel to open this at home. Cassel didn't like all of this. All the way home, Aika sat and quietly looked out the window, admiring the weather. Soon Aika arrived home. Cassel sent her to change and reminded her that she needed to write a response to Ruspa. Aika shouted to Cassel that she knew and remembered everything, and then Cassel suspected something was wrong. Aika was lisping. Aika changed her clothes, wrote a letter to Ruspa, and lay down on the bed. She was very tired during the day, so she was getting ready to go to bed. But then serpents appeared and told Ike that they urgently needed to conduct an experiment. Aika didn't understand what he was talking about. Serpents reminded her that she had found several names in the archive. Aika sat on the bed, took out a horseshoe and a piece of paper with names. She wanted to try to awaken the relic. Aika said out loud all the names written on the sheet, but nothing happened. Serpents assumed that it was all due to a mispronunciation. Aika was horrified, because of this, she might never call them at all. Aika, in hope, shouted one more name. It was the last one. But nothing happened. Serpents was upset. But then, suddenly, the horseshoe lit up and flew up. Aika didn't expect that. Aika's third relic, a large white horse named Ekus, appeared before her. Ekus was unhappy. It was a complete disappointment for him. His so-called owner couldn't even pronounce his name correctly. Aika apologized. She herself would have liked to repeat his name correctly, but she was missing a tooth. However, for Ekus, this was not particularly important. He thanked Aika for his release. Ekus understood that now he had to repay Aika. He took her in his teeth to take her somewhere. Ekus put Aika on himself. She was very scared, because the horse rose high into the sky. Soon Ekus brought Aika back. Ekus had just warmed up, but Aika didn't want to ride anymore. Ekus asked Aika to introduce herself. Aika told him her first and last name. Ekusu liked the cute name Aiki and wondered how much she would appreciate a ride on his magnificent body. Aika thought. She never judged anyone or anything. Ekusu's back turned out to be much stronger than Aika thought, but she was a little scared of the height. But she still enjoyed the ride. Ekusu's fur shone in the moonlight, and he ran very cool. Ekus was quite narcissistic. He told Aika that he knew all this very well, because he was quite cool and handsome. Aika asked Ekus what his power was. Ekus said that he had just demonstrated it to her. Ekus could appear anywhere in an instant, be it the top of the mountains or the sea. He could fulfill any wish. Ike was curious if he could become invisible. Serpents had such a power. Ekus replied that he could do this too. But with Aika's current capabilities, Ekus could only disappear from sight. But Aika was not satisfied with that. Ekus said that for now, he could stay inside the horseshoe, and she could call him at any moment. A moment later, Ekus had already left, without Aika even noticing it. Serpents was incredibly happy for Aika. He considered her incredible, because she was able to find the third artifact. Morning came. Kaisel was reading a letter from the Emperor. The Emperor was sure that Kaisel never opened the bag in the carriage. The Emperor explained that the contents had been Aika's baby tooth all this time, and she had wanted to keep it a secret, but the molar could simply have started growing in incorrectly. He asked Kaisel to continue to keep a close eye on Aika, since the Emperor's only hope was in him. Gerard was happy for Kaisel, because Kaisel had been waiting for this event for a long time. Kaisel was angry. He did not understand how Ayaka could hide such an important event from him. Kaisel ordered Gerard to use preservation magic on the tooth and order soft food to be served to Aika. Gerard went to carry out Kaisel's order, and on the way, he bumped into Zenda. He ran up to her and hugged her tightly, calling Zenda sister. Zenda got angry. She asked Gerard not to call her that at work. Gerard said that there was no one there. Besides, he had taken out all the trash. He was expecting gratitude. Zenda realized that Gerard was talking about the attackers on the Valyart estate. Gerard hadn't gotten to their leader, but he had taught them a good lesson. Gerard also told Zenda that he had important news for her. Gerard opened the bag and pulled out Aika's tooth. He showed it to Zenda. Zenda was delighted. She had noticed the looseness of this tooth for a long time and was waiting for it to fall out. Zenda asked Gerard if the gentleman knew about this, because Aika was afraid of this. Gerard said that Kaisel was aware, but was trying to keep everything to himself. Kaisel was very kind to Aika. Zenda did not understand how they could call him a mad dog. Gerard believed that Kaisel really did look like a dog, especially when he was angry. For such a wonderful occasion, Zenda decided to cook something for Aika. Someone was very angry with the Valyart family. Marquis Ligier did a lot of damage without even bothering to attend the noble council. And now he doesn't seem to know where his place is and is opening his own academy. It was Duke Deslin. He ordered his servant to stop the construction of the academy at any cost. The fact that Kaisel had a weak spot was only to their advantage, but the attack on the estate failed. With such impregnable defense, they couldn't even take advantage of the breach. Then a servant brought the Duke a parcel. He did not understand who it could be from. The servant explained that, judging by the stamp, it was the Cheshire Trading Company that had sent them a gift as a thank you for the deal. The Duke had close ties to the company and was curious about what it was all about. When Deslin opened the box, he was horrified by what he saw. The gift box contained a white snake's head. Deslin ordered to immediately find out who sent him this parcel. The servant said that there was a letter in the box. The letter stated that the man had received a gift sent by Deslin the previous night. It was Kaisel. In response, he decided to send the Duke the head of their master. He advised him to watch his neck more carefully. Morning came. As soon as Ayeka woke up, she saw a letter and a wrapped box on the bed. It was a letter and a gift from the Tooth Fairy. She exchanged Ayeka's tooth for a gift. Zenda was glad that the Tooth Fairy visited Ayeka, but Ayeka didn't understand how she found out, because only the Emperor and Zenda knew about the lost tooth. Zenda told Ayeka that there was nothing that the fairies didn't know about, and since this tooth had been taken from her, a new one would soon grow. Ayeka was worried that the Tooth Fairy might tell about this uncle, but Zenda said that was out of the question, and asked Ayeka if she wanted to tell about this uncle herself. But Ayeka didn't want to do this yet, and asked Zenda not to tell Kaisel about it either. Then, Ayeka got out of bed and flew towards the exit of the room. Zenda was upset. She didn't understand whether she and Gerard had really tried in vain yesterday. In the corridor of the estate, Ayeka met her uncle. She wanted to say hello to him, but she remembered that she still lisped. She was afraid that her uncle would understand everything. Ayeka decided not to enter into dialogue with Kaisel. Ayeka sat down at the table and began to eat breakfast. Kaisel himself approached her, and Ayeka was forced to greet him. Kaisel asked Ayeka if her hand was falling off, because she was constantly covering her mouth with it. But Ayeka said that everything was fine, and it was just exercise. Kaisel didn't understand whether Ayeka would really play this comedy until she grew a new tooth. He leaned towards her and said that a letter had arrived from Ruspa, and Ayeka immediately opened her mouth. Here, Ayeka realized that there was no point in hiding anymore, and Kaisel asked her if she really thought that he wouldn't notice the hole between her teeth. Kaisel asked Ayeka to open her mouth wider so that he could take a better look, but Ayeka did not understand how her uncle found out about her tooth. Kaisel was surprised, because it was as if the tooth jumped out of there. Ayeka was confused and began to tell her uncle that almost everything was like that. Kaisel stroked Ayeka's head and asked her if it hurt when the tooth fell out. Ayeka was surprised. She didn't understand whether her uncle was really going to tease her. Kaisel was glad that Ayeka wasn't in pain, but he didn't know what to do because Ayeka's face had become so haggard. Here, Ayeka realized that she had hoped in vain that her uncle would not mock her. Ayeka told her uncle that she was fine and could eat a full meal without any problems. Kaisel began to sit down on a chair and asked Ayeka not to rush, as she might get a stomachache. Here, Kaisel suddenly remembered that fake newspaper collage. Kaisel couldn't understand whether this little girl was hiding something and was suffering alone because of it. Zenda entered Ayeka's room and brought her something that could make her happy. Ayeka noticed a cake on the tray, but she was sure that was not all. Zenda took out an envelope and handed it to Ayeka. It was a reply from the young master. Zenda was right. It made Ayeka happy, and besides, the letter smelled nice. Ayeka felt like it had been perfumed. Zenda also told Ayeka that she had finished the thing that Ayeka had assigned her earlier. Zenda made a horseshoe necklace for Ayeka. Now Ayeka could safely carry Ekis on her without worrying that he would get lost. Ayeka started reading the letter from Ruspe, and her face immediately changed. Zenda didn't understand what had happened. Ruspe was heading to his lands with his father, so he won't be able to send letters to Ayeka for the foreseeable future. It was very far from here. Even in summer it was cold there. Snow could fall for weeks. The duchy was as large as the marquisate belonging to the Regir Castia family. In Castia, located in the south, it was warm all year round. Inside the envelope, Ayeka noticed flowers. Ayeka really liked them. The flowers were from the Duke's garden, and it took Rusp some time to dry them. Ayeka was sure that Rusp did it with his own hands for her. The gift was filled with sincerity. Zenda recommended storing them separately so as not to damage them. Ayeka also wanted to give a gift to Ruspa. Zenda said that there was not enough time to create a herbarium. She suggested putting the dried flowers aside for another time and preparing a different gift for this one. Zenda suggested making Rusp a fur hat or scarf. Aika agreed. They would have just enough time to do it a week before Rusp's departure. Aika had already started thinking about a hat option for Ruspe. She thought that a purple hat would suit him. Aika wanted to make a herbarium with Ruspe when he returned. Although Rusp had not yet left, Aika was already eagerly awaiting his return. Then Serpens appeared. He had nothing against the letters, but he wanted to remind Ayaka of her desire to train in controlling her abilities. Aika needed to learn to distinguish the colors of danger. She needed to learn to accept Serpent's energy into her body in order to learn to see fragments of both the future and the present. After all, they wouldn't get very far knowing only about the maid's wounds. Serpens believed that Aika shouldn't interfere in such trifles at all. Aika hadn't been able to use Serpens' full potential yet, and if things continued like this, she would be missing out on significant events. Since Aika was born a seeker, her life could be at risk, so she had to be more selective in her predictions. Since it's still difficult for Aika to control this herself, Serpens decided to choose which things Aika will see. Aika was not against it, but asked to give her a sign if her uncle was in danger, because she came to him with the goal of saving him. Aika firmly decided that she would protect the people she loved and those her mother cherished at any cost. Serpens told Ike that he agreed to this. Aika asked him to bend his tail and promise again. Serpens did it without further ado. Aika was confident that Serpens would keep his promise to her, but Serpens turned out to be a liar, and her uncle was in great danger. Serpens once told Aika that she shouldn't be surprised if her uncle got hurt. Serpens promised Aika that Cassel would not die, but would simply be slightly wounded. Aika was very angry with Serpens. She considered him a deceiver. She wanted Serpens to at least show her her uncle. After all, he can clearly see how much she worries about her uncle. Serpens felt sorry that he had to deceive Aika, but he did it for her sake. But Aika didn't want to communicate with Serpens at all, since he wasn't telling everyone a lot of things. After this, Aika ran to look for her uncle. She was scared that her uncle might actually be hurt. On the way, Aika met Gerard, and she began asking him about her uncle. Gerard told Aika that the gentleman had not yet returned and sent her to bed. But Aika did not understand anything because Gerard had left with Cassel. Aika learned to recognize by Gerard's face when he was telling the truth and when he was lying. Aika did not continue talking with Gerard and ran off to look for Cassel. Aika ran halfway through the mansion, but still hadn't found Cassel. She decided to check his office, since he goes there immediately after arriving. Aika was right. Uncle was in his office. Cassel heard someone approaching the office. He thought it was Gerard. Cassel asked him if Aika was sleeping. He asked Gerard not to let her in under any circumstances and to bring more bandages. But then Aika called her uncle. Cassel got scared. He didn't want Aika to see him like this. Cassel stood up and turned towards Aika. He immediately saw his tearful niece. Cassel was angry with Aika for not sleeping. He told her that he was fine and ordered her to run to bed. But Aika noticed the blood seeping through the bandages and rushed to her uncle. Aika started asking her uncle if he was in pain. Cassel asked her not to panic and said again that he was fine. Cassel took Aika in his arms and asked her to stop crying. Aika asked her uncle to let her go because his hand was injured and it could hurt him. Cassel said that he was not in pain and that he was not going to die. He once again asked Aika to calm down. Then someone entered the office and asked Cassel if this was Aika, the girl he was talking about. Aika didn't understand what kind of person this was. She was seeing him for the first time. A tall, fair-haired guy stood in front of Aika and greeted the girl. The guy was touched by Aika. He didn't even understand how she could be of the same blood as Cassel. Then he remembered that he had forgotten to introduce himself. It was Baron de Lamud, a friend of Cassel. Aika thought about it. She didn't understand if this guy was Count Lamad. The name seemed very familiar to her, but she could not remember where she had heard it. The Count asked Aika to simply call him Uncle, since he and Cassel were the same age. From then on, Aika simply called this guy Uncle Baron. The Count liked it. Coming from Aika's lips, it sounded even sweeter than he could have imagined. Syria told her daughter that there were many good people in the Lamond house, but this uncle seemed strange to her. Aika noticed abrasions on the Baron and thought that he was also wounded, but the Count explained that he received the scratches while fooling around with Cassel. The Count said that Cassel also got it from him because he won in a friendly duel, but Aika did not believe it because she considered her uncle to be the strongest. The Count was still touched by Aika and even offered her to become his niece, but Aika refused to leave her uncle. The count said that he should have gone to Ella's banquet, because then he could have met Aika much earlier. Ella was the count's younger sister. Aika met her at the Valyart ball. The count heard that Aika and Ella had been introduced to each other, and Ella couldn't stop bragging about it to him. Cassel asked the count to get out of his estate if he finished speaking, but the count was not going to leave, because his hand was also wounded. Aika told the count that he could stay, as they had many free rooms, but Cassel was not happy about the fact that his house was being rented out without his permission, and Aika said that she had simply borrowed part of it for a short time. Besides, she believed that her uncle's house was also her house. Aika, unlike Cassel, wanted the count to stay. Cassel asked Aika who was better, him or the count. Aika, without hesitation, answered Cassel that he was the best. Cassel was glad that Aika at least knew when to be accommodating. Cassel allowed the count to stay for one night. He envied Cassel. He also wanted such a niece for himself. Morning came. Cassel, Aika, and the count were having breakfast together. Aika was somehow depressed and could barely chew her food. The count noticed this and asked Aika if she had lost her appetite. But that was not the issue. Serpens hadn't appeared since the day Aika yelled at him. Even though Aika was angry at him, she was worried. Cassel asked Aika to stop daydreaming and eat properly. Today, he wanted to take her somewhere. Aika had been pestering Cassel for so long that he decided to fulfill her request. Cassel decided to take Aika to the house where she lived with her mother. Soon they were already heading there. Aika was incredibly happy that she would soon be going home. She was wondering if anything had changed there. Cassel said that everything there remained in its place, as if Aika had never left there. Cassel had been watching the house very carefully all this time. Cassel was curious why Aika took such a huge bag with her. He didn't understand whether she really wanted to take all the toys out of there. Aika said she would take a lot of toys, but in reality, she planned to take things that seemed important or reminded her of a relic. Soon Aika finally arrived at her home. Since that accident, Aika had never been home. Aika was happy. She returned to where she lived with her mother. Then someone approached her. The man could not believe that Ayaka had actually returned here. Aika was surprised. She didn't think that there could be someone in the house. It was Ro, the estate manager. Aika immediately threw herself into the girl's arms. Roa confessed to Aika that she also missed her. Aika confessed to the girl that she thought they would never meet again, but Roa waited for Aika to appear every day. Roa noticed that Aika had grown up a lot. She had grown taller and had even lost a tooth. Then Cassel came up to them and told the girl that their little nut was very excited. Roa greeted the Marquis, the first time she had the honor of meeting him in person. Roa communicated with Cassel by correspondence while she was managing the estate, and he kept her constantly informed of all the affairs. Aika was shocked. She didn't understand whether her uncle had really divulged the information. By the time Cassel and Aika arrived, Roa had packed the things Cassel had mentioned in his last letter into boxes. Aika became curious about what her uncle had decided to take, but Cassel said that she didn't need to know. Aika was outraged because this was her home. Cassel reminded Aika how yesterday she was going to rent his house to the Baron. Cassel asked Aika to stop picking at details and go do what she wanted. Aika considered her uncle to be greedy, but Cassel didn't care about Aika's bullying. Soon Aika entered her home. Nothing had changed in the house. Even all the candles were in their places. Here Aika stood against the wall and froze in place. There was a picture of Ayaka's mother hanging on the wall. Aika began to remember how she looked at this picture as a little girl when her mother was not around. Aika loved her mother very much. She considered her the most beautiful and coolest. The series told her daughter that Aika could look at this picture when she was not around, and then her mother would magically appear. Then Serpens appeared. He felt that Aika was sad and asked her if she missed her mother very much. Aika reminded Serpens that they had not yet made peace and asked him not to talk to her. Serpens, to Aika's surprise, asked her for forgiveness. Serpens realized that he had acted recklessly then, and he deeply regretted what he had done. Aika also apologized to Serpens for being so angry with him. Aika thought that something terrible had happened to her uncle. Aika and Serpens made peace. Aika entered her mother's room and was surprised. She had never seen such order there. Syria's desk had always been a huge tower of documents, but now it was perfectly tidy. At the table, Aika put the seal instead of her mother. Serpens was shocked by this fact. The series allowed this to her daughter. She thought it was normal, provided that Aika did everything right. The box was now completely empty. Serpens believed that Syria could have hidden everything in a safe place beforehand. Aika began to think where she would hide everything if she were her mother. A large wardrobe caught Aika's attention. Aika decided to look there. She thought that her mother could have hidden something important there. Aika remembered the hide-and-seek game she and her mother used to practice playing. Aika thought that Syria could definitely have left something there. The series taught Aika to hide in the closet, so Aika decided that the closet could be a safe place. After a thorough search for something interesting, Aika found a small box. The box was wrapped with Ayaka's favorite yellow ribbon, so Aika was sure that her mother had left these things behind. Aika was touched and almost cried. She tried to hold back her tears, as she promised not to cry. Aika told Serpens that she thought this find was enough, and they could return. Aika was sure that her mother had left a whole bunch of useful things for her. Kelpadia Estate. Father Ruspe reminded his son that he allowed him to meet with Aika on certain occasions. He told Ruspe that from now on, he should stay away from Miss Valliart. Previously, Ruspe's father was not against his son communicating with Aika, but circumstances changed. The nobles began to spread rumors that Ruspe was deeply infatuated with a miss of unknown origin. Some even said that Ruspe was planning an engagement. Ruspe told his father that there was no talk of an engagement, since he and Aika did not have that kind of relationship. The situation would have been different if the status of the Duchess had been officially announced. But as it was, participating in gossip was of no use. Father asked Ruspe not to forget that he was the only heir to the imperial throne. He always had to act impeccably, hiding his shortcomings. At this point, the conversation ended. The man sent his son to prepare for departure to the estate. The man was very worried about his son. After starting his training as heir, Ruspe's smile became rare and fleeting. His mother wasn't happy about it either, since Ruspe was at an age when he needed to develop and play. But the man believed that, for now, this was the best they could do for their son. To keep the nobility in check and support the imperial family, the Kelpodius family needs to strengthen Ruspe's position. Rossetia did not argue with her husband, but she was still glad to see Ruspe lively after his conversation with Aika. Rossetia also heard that Ruspe and Aika had been exchanging letters lately. The man thought that the Valliart family was also being cautious, since Ayaka had been hidden from the public for 7 years. He allowed Ruspe to communicate with Aika to support his son's desire, but much about him still raised questions in the man. Valliart is the shield and sword of the imperial family, but while Ruspe is still a child who cannot stand up for himself, he must have everything ready. Ruspe had already arrived in his domain. He was reading the letter that Aika had sent. Since it was very cold in the domain, Aika gave him a purple fur coat. If Ruspe had known that he would receive such a gift, he would have made every effort to meet with Aika before leaving. Ruspe hadn't been dating Aika for very long, but he already missed her. He was incredibly curious about what she was doing there now. Meanwhile, Kaisel was tormenting Aika, asking her to say "A," and open her mouth wide. Aika opened her mouth and screamed. Another tooth was missing at the bottom of her mouth. Kaisel was delighted. He joked with Aika that at this rate she would be left without teeth altogether. Kaisel asked Aika if she answered the tooth fairy. Aika replied that she asked her for a beautiful tooth. Kaisel believed that soon they would have to bribe the fairy, because Aika was such a difficult child, while Aika thought that she was quite obedient. Kaisel asked Aika not to cross the tooth fairy under any circumstances. The other day, Kaisel was planning to visit the new academy, and he asked Aika if she wanted to go with him. Aika didn't mind going there, and she also wanted to take Ruspe with her when he returned. At this point, Aika's work was finished, and she went to unpack her things. Aika and Serpens bent over an item from a box found in an old house. Aika couldn't understand what was written there. Serpens didn't know what it was either. The words written on the sheet were pink flower, infinity sign, hunger and lamp. Aika and Serpens decided that it was a code, and they started trying to decipher it. On the piece of paper was a family crest. Syria told her daughter about it, but Aika knew nothing about what was drawn below. Serpens suggested that Aika figure out the rest, but Aika said that Syria had said that this was how they should start. All this reminded Aika of the clues she saw when she went treasure hunting with her mother. Then, Aika had to match the clues in order to find the treasure. Aika had studied a lot and had been on a lot of treasure hunts with her mother, so this riddle was definitely within her power. Serpens forgave Ike for not rushing. His abilities were growing drop by drop. Gradually, he saw the right future. Akus was also with them and could also help. He could gallop away somewhere far away in a second, or take Aika somewhere secretly. Aika thanked Ikus, but Serpens was outraged. He didn't understand why Ikus appeared, even when he wasn't called. A couple of days passed. Zenda tried to dissuade Aika because it was too dangerous. After all, Aika could accidentally get hurt, and Zenda could be scolded by Cassel for that. Zenda didn't lose hope of dissuading Aika, but the girl was determined. After visiting the old house during the day, Aika trained her abilities with Serpens, and in the evenings she studied the clues left for her by her mother. When it was necessary to get to the archive late at night, without his uncle's knowledge, Akus would deliver Aika there. Before Ruspe returned, Aika wanted to give him a gift with her own hands, but Zenda thought it was too dangerous. She suggested that Aika choose the threads and embroider the design together. Aika begged Zenda to let her try it herself. After that, Zenda couldn't refuse Aika, but she also couldn't let her do it herself. Aika's manipulations were getting better and better, and Zenda was finding it harder and harder to cope with them. Zenda offered to hold Aika's hand. Aika could try to thread the thread, and she would continue. Aika agreed. She wanted to embroider the dried flowers that Rusp had given her, both flowers that he had sent. Zenda decided to start with yellow and asked Aika not to put in too much effort. Aika tried her best. She wanted to surprise Ruspe. Thanks to Zenda's help, Aika was doing very well. Then Cassel looked into their room. By that time, Aika and Zenda had finished embroidering the yellow flower. Aika was delighted, but she still felt like it was only thanks to Zenda, and Zenda said that they did it together. Now that Ayaka had done her part, Zenda decided to embroider the rest herself. Soon Zenda had already finished the drawing. Aika was delighted. It looked as if the flowers had bloomed right on the scarf. The scarf could get dirty on the way, so Aika decided to put it in a box. Aika wrapped her gift, and it was now ready to go. Aika was curious whether Ruspa would like her gift. Zenda said that of course she would, because the gift was filled with sincerity. Rusp returned home, but he was in no mood. Here he was told that a gift and a letter had arrived from the Marquisate of Lighier. Rusp took the letter in his hands. He did not understand whether it was from Aika. Ruspe thought that in the letter, Aika would offer to meet him, and he could not refuse. So he did not understand whether he should talk to his father again. But his father was adamant that time, so Rusp wasn't sure if he would listen to him. But after reading the letter to the end, Rusp was horrified. In the letter, Aika wrote to him that she was ill. Meanwhile, Aika was walking along the corridors of the mansion. She wondered if Rusp had received the letter. She was sorry that they would not be able to see each other for now, but there was nothing that could be done. Then someone approached Aika and said that young Mr. Ruspe had arrived to see her. Rusp stood at the gate of the mansion. Aika was at a loss. She didn't expect that, after the letter, Rusp would immediately come to her. Aika lay down on the bed and wrapped herself in a blanket. Rusp sat next to the bed. Ruspe apologized to Aika for the sudden visit. He was very shocked by the message, so he immediately went to her. Rusp was worried. He asked Aika what hurt her, because she wrote to him that she was ill. Aika didn't understand what to do. She knew for sure that she was in big trouble. Aika told Ruspe that she got sick so that he wouldn't come, but he came running headlong. She didn't think about it at all. Ruspe offered Aika to read a book, but Aika said that she was fine and just needed to rest. Ruspe asked Aika what he could do for her. Aika didn't know what to do or what to say. She didn't want Ruspe to worry. Then Serpens appeared and asked Aika why she shouldn't confess everything, since everything turned out this way. Serpens believed that Rusip would understand Aika because he was her friend. Aika got up and sat on the bed. Aika apologized to Ruspe and admitted that she had deceived him. Ruspe didn't understand what was happening. Aika asked Rusp not to laugh before explaining. Aika opened her mouth and asked Rusp if he could see, but Rusp didn't understand what was going on. Aika said that the thing was that she had lost 2 teeth, so she was embarrassed to meet him. Aika said she planned to meet when her teeth grew in, but that would take a long time. Then it dawned on Rusp that Aika actually didn't feel any pain. After this, Rusp immediately felt better and was in a good mood again. He was glad that Aika didn't have any pain. He said that shortly before his name day last year, he also lost a tooth. Ruspe understood Aika. Changing teeth is natural, and everyone goes through it. Ruspe told Aika that there is no need to be embarrassed about it. Suddenly, Aika got out of bed and ran somewhere. Aika invited Ruspe to play. Since he had come, she asked him to stay overnight with her. Rusip decided to confess to Aika, because he left for her in secret and he needed to return. Then, Cassel entered the room and asked Rusp and Ayaka if they had finished their conversation. Aika and Ruspi were scared. They did not expect Cassel to come into them. Cassel turned to Rusp. Now he was only concerned with him. Cassel needed to talk to Ruspi alone. Cassel and Ruspe entered the office. Cassel learned that Rusp had come to them without asking. Ruspe told Cassel that he was very ashamed of his actions and that he would return home immediately. But Cassel decided to keep Rusp with him. It was already late, and it was dangerous to return. Cassel asked Rusp not to worry, because he had made an agreement with his father. Rusp was rushing to them because he was worried about Ike, so Cassel felt he had to repay him. He told Ruspe that he could play with Ayaka while he was playing, and that moralizing would have to wait until tomorrow. Ruspe became cheerful and was incredibly grateful to the Marquise. Aika and Ruspi were playing in the room, but then Zenda came in and said that it was time to go to bed. Zenda turned off the light, but decided to leave a nightlight for the boys. She asked them not to stay up too long. Aika promised that she would fall asleep quickly, and she and Ruspe wished Zenda good night. Aika admitted to Ruspe that she had a lot of fun today and that she would like to play like this every day. Aika decided to ask Ruspe what he did while he was at the estate. Rusp said that he first greeted the people who ran the estate and went to inspect the property. They rode around the area, checking whether the lands were threatened by problems or dangers. This was Rusp's first time doing this. He was scared. He had never traveled so far before, but everything turned out to be much more interesting than he thought. Ruspe told Ayaka that perhaps someday he would take her with him. Then Ruspe remembered something and jumped up. Ayaka even got scared. He got out of bed and took out of his bag the gift he had prepared for Ayaka. He was going to send it with a letter, but he is happy to deliver it in person. Ayaka opened the box and found a brooch inside. Ayaka was delighted. Ruspe said that this brooch was made by a famous master from his family. Ayaka didn't know where to attach it. Rusp said that she could wear it on her clothes, neck or chest, and change the ribbon. Ruspe helped Ayaka pin the brooch to her pajamas. Ayaka asked Rusp if it suited her. Rusp said that the brooch suited her very well. Rusp said that there was another gift hidden inside the box. Ayaka took out another box and opened it. There was a bracelet in it. The color of the stone on it was very similar to the color of Rusp's eyes. This was a traditional bracelet of the Tanun tribe, located in the north of Vopodia, and it is said that this bracelet brings good luck. Ruspe made this bracelet, hoping that it would bring good luck to Ayaka. Ayaka thanked Ruspe and promised him never to take off the bracelet. Ruspe thanked Ayaka and the scarf and said that he would always carry it with him. Ayaka wanted to play some more, but she had to go to bed because Zenda might scold her. Ayaka couldn't help but ask Ruspe if he had practiced magic after returning from the estate. Ruspe said that he hadn't had time for it. Ayaka told Ruspe that several wizard uncles had come to her house, and she was curious whether Ruspe would become the same. Ruspe replied to Ayaka that he didn't yet know whether he would be able to do it. Ayaka noticed that Ruspe was upset. Ayaka didn't understand whether she had asked something wrong. Does Ruspe really not want to be a magician, or is it his family that is stopping him? Suddenly, Ayaka lay down closer to Rusp and hugged him. Ayaka told Ruspe that no matter who he became, she would still be happy for him. Wizard or not, Ayaka will support him in any case. After all, she is his friend, which means that she will always be on his side. Rusp smiled and thanked Ayaka for her support. Now Ayaka decided to try to sleep. Ruspe suddenly asked Ayaka if he could hold her hand while she slept. Ayaka took Ruspe by the hand and asked if this was what he wanted to do. Ruspe smiled and thanked Ayaka. Morning came. Ruspe had to return home. Ayaka saw him off. Rusp got into the carriage and waved his hand to Ayaka. In the carriage, Rusp felt sad. He understood that upon arriving home, he would no longer see Ayaka. Soon Ruspe arrived home. The maid told him that the Duke was waiting for him in his chambers. Ruspe entered his father's room. He was standing by the window and greeted his son. Suddenly, the father told Rusp that in a month, he would be able to communicate with the girl Valiart again. Until that moment, he asked his son to try not to become the object of noble gossip. Ruspe did not understand why his father suddenly changed his mind and decided to find out from his father. The Duke explained that the Marquise of Legier had given him an idea. A large summer banquet was to take place in a month. On this day, Ayaka Valiart was to be officially declared the heir to the House of Valiart. A week passed. Ayaka was sitting at lunch. Cassel slipped her some kind of envelope. Ayaka didn't understand what it was. Cassell explained to her that it was an invitation. Aika didn't know about the announcement yet. Cassell explained the invitation by saying that she was bored sitting at home. They were supposed to go to a banquet with their grandfather. Cassell asked Aika to pay more attention in class, and he himself was going to choose a dress for her for the banquet. Cassell believed that this banquet was a wonderful opportunity to remind those who bark as they please about themselves, so that everyone understands that Miss Aika de Valliart is not someone whose name can be mentioned in vain. Cassell also told Aika that he was going to assign a personal knight to her. Aika hoped that Zenda would be her first guardian and personal knight. Cassell told Aika that she would find out everything tomorrow. He didn't want to tell her everything at once. Seeing her personal knight Ike, she was shocked. She did not expect such a turn of events. The Great Summer Banquet is one of the major annual events of the Wofford Empire. It is attended by all the aristocratic families of the capital and serves as a debut ball and charity evening. Aika was already 7 years old. Kaisel built her social boundaries step by step, as if climbing a ladder, so that she could enjoy what she rightfully deserved as the only princess. At the very beginning, it was necessary to silence the gossip of the aristocrats with a debut ball that would strengthen Aika's position. Kassel sat in his office and thought about the current situation. He was long tormented by doubts about whether it was right to present Aika to society now. Aika reminded Kasselia of Syria more and more, even in her cunning and secrecy. When Aika learned of Kaysel's wound, Gerard swore to him that he had not told her about it. Gerard wouldn't lie. Aika's intuition impressed Kassel, but everything has its limits. He didn't understand how this was even possible. After that attack on Rado's house, Aika acted as if she knew the future. Syria and Aika were very similar to each other. The series would suddenly leave and return in complete disarray, or seem obsessed with work, although it looked like it was running away from something. One day she suddenly disappeared and returned with a child, and later simply died. Cassel never cared who Aika's father was. Back then, he only cared about the safety of Syria and Aika. However, the more Kaisel learned about his sister's death, the more he felt that he had to not only look for those responsible, but also take a different look at her past. Meanwhile, Aika was still looking at the Iron Knight. Suddenly, he asked her how she liked it. He thought it turned out great. Aika recognized that voice. The knight told Aika that he would be accompanying her to the banquet, so he decided to try on the armor. The knight took off his helmet, and Aika saw Gerard in front of her. Aika was delighted that Gerard would be her personal knight. She thought that this armor suited him. Gerard bowed before Aika and said that he would protect her at the cost of his own life. Aika didn't understand who would look after her uncle then. Gerard replied that other knights would go with him. Zenda came up to them from behind and asked Gerard to take off his armor, as he was going to a banquet, not to war. But for Gerard it was very important. He was appointed as the young Mrs. Knight, so he thought the armor was necessary. Besides, he had already polished it to a shine. In any case, Zenda was glad that Gerard became Aika's knight. He would not be afraid to put his life on the line in order to protect Aika. It was time for Aika to go to class, where she would be taught the etiquette that needed to be followed at a banquet. After Gerard was chosen as Aika's guardian, the day of the banquet was rapidly approaching. Cassel and Aika were busy with preparations. Fortunately, Teacher Logis did not do anything special. The best thing was that Aika's tooth had already grown significantly, and Aika stopped whistling. In the morning, the peacock lady named Esmeralda prepared a whole bunch of dresses for Aika. Aika tried on each of them and barely chose one, after which Esmeralda instantly took away all the rest. Aika really liked that dress. She looked very cute in it, so she wanted to try it on again. Aika was in anticipation, because she had never had such a big banquet before. Here, Cassel decided to ask Aika directly whether Gerard had told her about his injury. Aika told Cassel that none of the servants had told her about this. Cassel asked Aika how she then realized that she needed to run to him. Aika didn't know what to do, because she couldn't tell her uncle about the precognition. Aika said that, then she heard the carriage and rushed to meet it. But Gerard said that he arrived alone, but his face was strange. Aika didn't understand why she was shaking so much, because the lodge was small. Today, Cassel seemed especially serious to her. Cassel asked Aika if this was really why she ran to him. Aika said that everything was like that. She was interested in how his hand was. Cassel replied that his hand was already completely fine, and everything on him was healing like on a dog. Aika exhaled. Her uncle was his old self again. She needed to be more careful if something like this happened again. And then that very day came, the day of the big summer banquet. Aika was excited. She was told that she would meet many new friends. She wondered if Rusby would be there. Cassell explained that the Kelpodia family was required to attend the ball every year because they were members of the royal family. Cassell did not allow Aika to take off the sign. She was upset because she wanted to look beautiful at her first banquet. Aika believed that the nameplate spoiled her entire image. Cassell, on the contrary, thought it was cute. Aika arrived at the ball. She was delighted. Everything around was beautifully decorated. The first thing Aika did was meet her grandfather. He took his granddaughter in his arms and decided to carry her to the palace himself. The knights standing at the door greeted them and offered to escort them. Duke Valliart, Marquis Ligier, and the young lady of the Valliart house were introduced to the guests. All people's attention shifted to Aika. People thought that they would continue to hide her. Aika didn't particularly like the fact that all the people were staring at them. She was wondering if Rusp had arrived. Then someone told Aika that her dress looked incredible, like she was a princess. Aika turned her head and saw Uncle Baron and Rusby. The Baron did not understand whether Aika and Rusby already knew each other. Aika said that Rusby was her first friend. The Baron did not expect that Aika and Rusby would be such close people to each other. The Baron really wanted to know in detail how Aika and Rusby met. And he also heard that Aika had recently visited a new academy. Aika said that her grandfather helped her a little, and she wrote her name on a stone. Then they put them together. The Baron realized that everything was going smoothly with the construction of the academy. Later, Aika and Rusby could go to the same school. Then Cassell turned his head and saw someone. As it was assumed they were already here, Cassell needed to take measures to prevent them from getting close to Aika. Cassell asked the Baron to lend him his ear. He wanted to whisper something to him. Aika was asked if she wanted to say hello to children her age and make new friends. Cassell asked Aika not to worry. He said that they would keep an eye on her. Aika was worried. She never had friends, except Rusby. She didn't understand whether she should go alone. Then Rusby came up to her, took Aika by the hand, and suggested that they go together. Rusp was sure that then Aika would not be so scared. Aika agreed and thanked Rusby. Aika and Rusby were walking through the hall, when suddenly Aika called out to Rusby. Everyone looked friendly, but she was afraid that no one would want to meet her. She was afraid that the children might laugh at her old-fashioned name tag, but Rusp encouraged his friend and reminded her that he was there for her. Rusby was incredibly happy when Aika invited him to become friends. Aika reminded Rusby that at first he didn't want to be friends with her either. Rusby asked her to forget about it. Rusp believed that once others got to know her better, they would quickly warm up to her. Aika realized that it wasn't scary at all if she couldn't make new friends. After all, she already has a good friend, Rusby. Aika and Rusby met 3 kids on their way. Aika introduced herself to them and asked if she and Rusp could play with them. But there was no answer. Aika did not understand whether she had failed from the very beginning. Here the girl asked Aika if she was a young lady of the Valliart house. The girl introduced herself to Aika. Her name was Refi. Her father was Count Daim. The girl was from the Daim house. Aika was glad that Refi knew her name and asked her to speak as usual, without formalities. But Refi believed that this was not right with a young lady. The girl was also 7 years old. Aika told her that since they were friends, they did not have to use formal speech. Rusby also told Refi that everything was fine and they could communicate normally. Refi understood the guys and promised to talk to them as usual. Then another girl approached Aika and asked if she was that same Aika de Valliart, a girl with bright red hair and burgundy eyes, about the same age as Aika. Aika told the girl that she had a very cute dress and asked her name, but the girl continued to look angrily at Aika. She began to scold Aika for not having been properly trained in etiquette, because during a conversation, it was boring to show respect, and one could not begin by assessing the image. The girl believed that even despite Aika's age, she would soon become an authoritative person in Wofford, and a representative of high society should set an example of impeccable etiquette. Aika said that her uncle behaved freely with close friends, but the girl said that the Marquis was an exception, and not everyone could act like him. Then, a boy intervened in the conversation and asked Aika not to pay attention. It was just that Corbin was fixated on the rules. The boy's name was Louis. He was from the Baroque's family of counts. Then the girl decided to give her name. Her name was Corbin. She was from the Earl Laurel family. Louis told Aika that he had heard that she lived in the Marquis's residence, and he was curious if the rumors about how things were organized there were true. It was the first time Aika had heard that there were some rumors about her uncle's residence. Louis said that these were more like terrifying gossip. They say that instead of dogs, the Marquis breeds man-eating tigers. Every night, the ghosts of unjustly killed servants wander the mansion, and all the maids in the mansion are well-trained killers. Aika, having heard all this, was horrified. Aika said that all of this was an absolute lie, and that they didn't have any tigers or ghosts, but Louis didn't believe her and asked Aika to be frank. Aika didn't understand where such rumors came from, because her uncle and grandfather were not bad people. Then the movement began. Everyone greeted the son of the empire. The emperor came out into the hall. He thanked everyone for joining the banquet and asked them not to be shy and to enjoy themselves. Then he approached the children to talk to them. The emperor wished them a good time here. Aika thanked him. The others still couldn't believe their eyes and ears. The emperor left, and Aika's new friends were shocked when the emperor himself came up to greet them. Refi told Aika that Louis wanted to show them something interesting and invited her to come with them. Aika was surprised, but agreed to go with the guys. Louis led the boys away from the crowd of people and began to show them his bracelet. He pressed it, and a melody came out, like from a music box. Aika was delighted, because there was a real butterfly flying there. Louis said that his dad gave him this device. Louis wondered what kind of device Aika had been given, but Aika said she had only been given dolls and an academy. Refi was thrilled, because Aika was given a building like the ones her older siblings go to wear cool clothes. But Corbin said she had never heard of anyone giving anything like that. Louis said that for a person of his level, getting an academy is a normal thing, only the scale is different. Aika asked him to show her that thing again. She really liked that butterfly. Aika thought she was very beautiful and cool. Louis began to show Aika the magic of the bracelet once again, while Ruspe stood nearby and watched all of this. Suddenly, Ruspe told Aika that she had a magical device, but Aika did not understand what he meant, because she had never received anything like it. Rusp asked Aika to stop. He wanted to show her something. He pressed the stone on the brooch he had given her recently, and a small animal appeared in front of them. Aika was impressed. She froze and stared at the squirrel. Refi and Louis appreciated it too. Refi squealed with delight. This squirrel seemed very cute to her. Aika asked Ruspe if this was a magical device. Ruspe nodded and said that he forgot to tell her about it then. Refi started petting the squirrel. She wanted to ask her dad for the same device for her birthday. But Rusp said that this was exclusive to Aika, since the stone was made to order. Aika thanked Rusp for such a gift. Before that, she thought it was an ordinary brooch. Aika also showed Rusp the bracelet he gave her. She hasn't taken it off since that day. Ruspe told Aika that he took with him the scarf that she made for him. Aika took Ruspe by the hand and suggested that they go look for some treats. Soon Ayaka and Ruspe were standing at the table and trying all sorts of treats. Deslin was outraged by Aika's behavior, because she frolicked as if she was at home. The man standing next to the Duke was also impressed by Ike's agility. Deslin thought they were starting to show their cards, but Aika was declared the young lady of the Valyart house, and the man was incredibly curious about whose child she was and whose power she was destined to strengthen. Fully aware that everyone's eyes would be on this, the emperor still gave his consent. He seemed docile and reserved, but in fact he was cunning. Now Deslin kept all contacts to a minimum. Although he kept a close eye on the young lady, he was sure that Aika was a child with a connection to the emperor. However, there has been no concrete evidence of this so far. But then someone leaned over to the man and said something to him. He was very happy, because progress appeared from an unexpected direction. Now this evening promised to be much more interesting. Grandfather came up to Aika. He was glad that Aika was having a good time. Refi said that Ayaka had a very cute squirrel, but the Duke didn't understand what she was talking about. Aika approached her grandfather and said that she would show it to him later. Aika was picked up by her grandfather. She said goodbye to her new friends and promised that they would definitely see each other again. The guys also said goodbye to Ayaka and said that they would definitely look forward to the next meeting. Aika boasted to her grandfather that she had made many new good friends. Aika asked Rusp if this was true. Rusp said that this was how it was. But suddenly, Rusp remembered how Aika had been so sweet and courteous to that boy Louis. His face immediately changed, and Aika noticed it. Aika thanked Ruspu for today and invited him to stay overnight with her next time. She suggested that they play together later. Ruspu smiled. He promised Aika that he would definitely come to her. Here, as she was getting into the carriage, Aika saw someone. In the distance, two men were talking about something. They were talking about something popular. Aika recognized this voice. Aika heard exactly the same voice during the incident with the carriage. Aika wanted to see the faces of those people. Aika immediately got off her grandfather's hands and walked away from the carriage. The Duke did not understand whether she had not played enough. He told Aika that it was already late and it was time to go to bed. Aika tried to object to her grandfather, but then Cassel grabbed her and asked her to watch her step. Cassel sent Aika to the carriage and said that it was time for them to go home, but Aika asked to give her another minute. In the end, Aika went home without finding out anything. Zenda couldn't get Aika out of the bath, and she had been sitting there for a long time. Soon Zenda finally managed to pull Aika out. Zenda was curious about how Aika spent her time at the banquet. She was forced to sit in the corner of the hall, so she didn't even see her. Aika said that she had fun and made new friends. Zenda said that then perhaps she would soon receive invitations. Since Aika had made new friends, she might be invited to a tea party to eat delicious food together and get to know each other better. Aika was delighted and wanted to treat her new friends to the desserts that Sophie makes. Here, Aika remembered that her uncle had said something to her in the carriage. Cassel doubted that Aika could have a magical device. Aika didn't understand why the squirrel didn't appear now, as she had appeared then in front of the boys. Cassel told Aika that she was a liar. He thought that she made it all up. Aika didn't understand why the toy stopped working, because it pressed the same place as Ruspi. Here, Aika realized that if this was a magical device, Ruspi would not have given it to her without warning. Aika realized that Rusp used magic, even though he didn't want to reveal the secret. Aika realized that Ruspi did this to help her make friends. Aika didn't know much, but she thought that using magic wasn't easy. Rusp had to put in some effort when he used it in the Imperial Palace. She decided to tell Ruspi that he shouldn't do that when people were watching. A couple of days passed. Aika was invited to the Count's family. It was an Imperial family, just like Valiart. Zenda gathered Ayaka and asked her not to worry too much, since the Count was a good man. Zenda asked Aika not to forget to take the gift and the sign, but Aika did not want to wear the sign. Since the big banquet, the young miss has received invitations from various families. All invitations were screened to ensure that Miss Ike was not in any danger. Today was the first day and the first step of the young miss towards the world. Aika arrived at Refi's house. The girl went out to meet her friend. Refi thanked Aika for her visit. She would have been very upset if Aika had not come to see her. Several other young girls also went to tea with Refi and Aika. Corbin greeted Aika and said that she was coming with them. Hayes, a girl from the Wayne house, also joined them. Aika greeted Hayes and told her that she could just call her by her first name. But then Corbin intervened and said that things wouldn't work that way. After all, tea drinking is an excellent opportunity to demonstrate etiquette. Corbin had mastered etiquette perfectly, so she was ready to teach it to Aika from A to Z. Aika and Refi were in shock. They were even a little scared. Corbin began teaching the other girls etiquette. They were also confused, but did not argue with Corbin. Aika decided to ask Corbin if they couldn't talk like usual. But Corbin believed that they had to adhere to the rules of etiquette, because they were the future of the empire. Then someone came up and said that he had grabbed some tea and sweets, as well as a gift that Aika had brought. The tea party began. Refi thanked the girls for coming. She prepared her favorite tea and other drinks for them. Aika invited the girls to try the desserts that Sophie had prepared. Corbin was horrified. Aika again spoke informally. Aika started showing how to eat desserts. Corbin almost fainted when Aika took a cake with her bare hand. Then Aika brought the cake to her mouth and carefully took a bite. Aika said it would taste better if you took a giant bite at once. Corbin began to explain to Aika that desserts should not be handled with bare hands. Here, Refi repeated after Aika. Then Hayes bit her, and Corbin was horrified. The girls were delighted. It really was tastier this way. The cake seemed to melt in your mouth. Corbin interrupted the girls, saying that it was impossible to talk with your mouth full. Hayes said the buttercream flavor comes out best when you take a big bite, and asked Corbin to try it. But Corbin couldn't do that. She believed she had to be a model of good manners. So Corbin decided to use a knife and fork as she should. Corbin tried the dessert, and she really liked it too. Refi asked Aika how to eat cookies. Aika said that they should be broken in half and dipped in milk. Then someone approached Aika and asked her if she was Miss Valyart. It was the man Aika had seen with Ruspi. The man told Aika that she had not changed at all since their last meeting. The girls began to greet the Duke, but Aika did not understand what he was doing there. Duke Nodium asked Aika what she was doing there and called her a little one. He didn't understand whether the Marquise was allowing her to wander wherever she wanted. Aika could not restrain herself and shouted to the Duke that she was not a baby. Aika said that she was invited as a friend and asked the Duke what he was doing there. Aika continued to quarrel and argue with Duke Nodium, while Hayes was restless. Aika asked the Duke, who he had come to scold this time. She said that she and the girls had done nothing wrong. But Nodium did not understand why he should scold the girls. He came to visit Count Dame. Aika reminded him that last time he scolded Ruspe. Although he had done nothing wrong then, Nodium noticed that Aika had already adopted her grandfather's character. He said that back then, it was for Rusp's benefit. Then someone approached Duke Nodium and asked what he was doing there. It was Count Dame, Refi's father. Aika noticed that Refi looked very much like her father. He greeted Ayaka and said that she could continue to have fun, and if she needed anything, she could safely contact him. The Count called Duke Nodium into the living room. Aika suddenly felt sad. She realized that having a father was very wonderful. Nodium turned around and asked Aika to stop staring at him, since he had already said that he was leaving. The girls were in shock. They did not understand what happened between Aika and the Duke. Soon Aika told the girls the whole story. Refi believed that although Duke Nodium was strict, he was not a bad person. Aika remembered that her mother told her only good things about the Nodium family. Ruspe also asked Aika not to be angry with the Duke, telling her that he was not a bad person. Aika told the girls that she was nevertheless worried that he might offend them. Hayes approached Ike and offered her to try eating the cookies. The girls sat at the table. Corbin told Aika that she felt very close to Rusp. Corbin asked Aika if she and Rusp were dating. Aika didn't understand what Corbin meant. She thought she wanted to know if they had become closer. While Aika is next to Ruspe, her soul is joyful and excited. And if trouble happened to Rusp, then Aika became sad and angry. Aika told the girls that she and Ruspe were very close. Aika didn't know what would happen when they grew up, but she was sure of one thing. Ruspe was her first boyfriend, and Aika was also his first girlfriend. That's why they were best friends. And Aika was sure that this would definitely not change. The girls felt awkward and decided to end their questioning there. Soon Aika was getting ready to go home. She told the girls that she had a lot of fun with them. Refi suggested that next time we have a meeting about embroidery, since everyone has already started learning it. Aika noticed that Corbin had a dissatisfied look on her face. Besides, she didn't listen to anything at all. Aika thought she was bored. But then Corbin said she had a lot of fun too. Corbin promised that she would try better next time, since the young lady's manners were so far from ideal. Corbin wasn't particularly fond of the idea of calling each other by just their first names. Aika approached Corbin and suggested that they have the same great time next time. Soon Aika's carriage headed home, and Aika's happiness knew no bounds. She was as happy as when she first became friends with Rusp. She thought it would be great if he were with them too. Zenda was also glad to see Aika's delight. Aika admitted that of all the girls, Corbin seemed the most mature to her. She was a little scary, but at the same time, cool and sweet. Zenda said there were families where manners were taught especially strictly, but Gerard agreed with Ayaka's opinion that children should grow up as children. Aika was also impressed by the fact that Refi looked very much like her dad. The Count made a good impression on Aika. She was sure that he was a good man. Zenda realized that meeting with the Count was very memorable for Aika. She wondered if Aika felt lonely, seeing such a friendly couple of daughter and father. Aika asked Zenda if she could learn to ride a horse. Corbin learned to ride a pony named Adios. Zenda said that this was a serious undertaking and could be dangerous for now, but she promised that she would try to persuade Cassel. Aika was glad. When Aika rode Ekus, he didn't shake, but she might need to mount him, so that's why she wanted to learn. Aika decided to invite Ruspa to go for a ride together as soon as she learned to ride. Suddenly, the carriage rocked. Gerard and Zenda were horrified. They didn't understand what was happening. They immediately rushed to cover Aika. Aika froze. This incident reminded her very much of that terrible day. Gerard tried to bring Aika to her senses. He did not understand what was happening to her. He decided to check out the situation outside and asked Zenda to keep an eye on Aika. Aika remembered something. During the accident, among other sounds, she definitely heard the voice of that old man, and the one she heard at the reception was another unfamiliar voice. Those people were then looking for the stone that Aika swallowed. It was a secret between her and her mother. Gerard began to climb into the carriage. He understood that Aika was shocked. He explained that a wild animal had most likely jumped out onto the road and that they would move on as soon as they had examined the carriage. Gerard told Zenda to call a doctor immediately as soon as they returned. Aika didn't understand whether they really were the people hunting for her mother. Soon Aika arrived home. Gerard explained to Cassel what had happened. Gerard said there was one thing that bothered him, regardless of the incident. Gerard said that Ike really remembered the images of Lady Rafai and Count Dame. Gerard was alarmed by the fact that Aika looked at them for a very long time, so he decided to say something about it just in case. Cassel was left alone. He wanted to kill Aika's father, so he didn't look for him specifically, especially since it didn't matter to him who Aika's father was, since Syria had returned safe and sound. But Cassel understood that Aika might want to go to her dad. Then Aika entered Cassel's room.